Hey everybody, welcome to We've Got Ward, a Doof Media podcast series where we expertly dissect and discuss Ward, Wildbow's return to the world of parahumans. My name is Matt Freeman, and this is my co-host, Scott Daly.
Matt, I want to make a transaction.
Oh, really?
Yes. I want you to do that thing that you do that got you tossed in jail to begin with.
Ah, well, what do I get in return? Will you free me from this prison?
No. They're definitely gonna kill you.
Oh.
Yeah, I can get you like a TV or something. We got Game of Thrones.
Hard pass.
Oh. Okay. Well, this is the weekly podcast where Matt and I eagerly dive into Wildbow's world of justified egg hatred, Faustian bargains, and alien-based death powers as we analyze and interpret this ongoing web serial. This week, we continue Arc 13 Black with chapters 10 and 11. Victoria, Sveta, and Lisa continue to gather information on Teacher's operation from a different trio of troublemakers, right as Teacher's information bomb goes off, releasing Dirty Cape secrets to the public. This, combined with Sveta's very bad day and some angle-based memory surfing, pushes Victoria to tell all the normies to go fuck themselves, and then goes to hang out with bio-manipulating monsters. Cool. Matt, what do you think of these two chapters?
Well, these are fantastic. I think it's probably worth it to say right off the bat that I actually had a lot of trouble with my summarizing of these chapters because they are basically, they just contain large amounts of very detailed and complex dialogue where every given paragraph is doing like 8 different things.
Yeah.
And when the whole 2 chapters are made up of that kind of content, you can't really summarize. You just end up picking things that you want to talk about, which it's inevitable. I did feel a degree of frustration as I had to be like, well, we can't talk for 16 hours about these 2 chapters. So
I mean, we could.
Yeah. We could, yes. But I some frustration. It's inevitable, though. I kind of just wanted to say that because I'm inevitably going to be skipping over. We are inevitably going to be skipping over some things, but that there was so much in here, and it's all such great stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the climax, the culmination of our arc a little bit. We know now we're recording this on Tuesday night, so we know that there's another chapter in the arc after this one, but it is an interlude, and it seems like it's probably going to be the final chapter of the arc. But this is kind of our climax, and it's, as you said, it's the climax of this arc is conversations, important, world-defining conversations. Yes, but it's conversations, and that is difficult to summarize. It's difficult to go in. I mean, like, if you look at our script, it's longer than it normally is, but that is because it's really just blocks of text copy pasted from the book, because that's
true.
Because between the two of us, we are pulling stuff like crazy.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun. I'm going to enjoy talking about it, but I get your frustration. It has nothing to do with the quality of writing. It's just a very different kind of I almost said action scene. I don't mean that. It's just a different kind of conflict.
Yeah. I mean, it is the fault of the quality of writing, and that the quality of writing is too good and requires too much breakdown.
Yeah. How dare you, Ward? Be worse.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. We got an announcement. Is that right?
Yeah, it's just our standard. Let's remind you guys about the quarterly fan art contest that is coming up here. I think we've got 2 weeks left to submit your entries. A little under 2 weeks, 2 weeks from yesterday, to submit your entries for our quarterly fan art contest. Theme is relationships. Entries are due Monday, May 27th at midnight Pacific time. You can go over to doofmedia.com for more details or click the link in our show notes. This has cash prizes. These rewards are funded by our patrons, so we do give out prizes for these things. So I know probably a lot of you guys have already started working on these, but in case you haven't, there's still time. Get to draw in, or what is What do you call it when you're like drawing on a computer? Is that just drawing?
I think there's probably a special word for it. I don't know.
Let's do that.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. It's always great.
I love these contests. I love them so much. And I know we've been saying this every week for like a month now, but do it.
Seriously.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on into 13.10. And here we have Victoria tending to the old man in the back seat, suffering from his shove down the stairs, and Tattletale in the front seat trying to give Imp some overtly manipulative advice regarding how to manage the heartbroken under her charge. The breakthrough women in the back seat are baffled and outraged by Tattletale's advice, but I think that we, the readers, actually understand that Lisa's probably right when she says to Imp, "You're not going to have any pretty options."
Yeah, I agree with that.
So, like, this is a good place to start, right? Because there's like 15 different functions served by starting the chapter with this half overheard conversation. Like, first of all, it's setting up background things. It's reminding us that the heartbroken exist as a background element with a lot of potential to make moves, and that their situation is evolving in the background even as we're not focused on them. It's reminding us that this mob of emotional manipulators exists and ties into ties in basically with the many beats of emotional powers that we're going to see in these chapters. I'm thinking specifically of Engel's involvement.
Yeah.
It's showing Victoria and Sveta reacting to Lisa being manipulative, which for one thing is saying stuff about their relationship, saying something about how they're a bit at odds with Lisa. But on the other hand, Lisa is being manipulative in a way that they can't really find a good toehold to criticize, because basically she's doing it on behalf of Kenzie's team. However, Victoria is very concerned about Kenzie's team and Kenzie's state of mind. So there's all of these things layered into and subtextually inside this overheard conversation.
Yeah, I love that. I totally agree. And it's like, it's really functionally effective. I mean, the thing that I like about it is on top of being functionally effective, it's just, it's like sharply written dialogue. Yeah. Like, we don't hear a word coming from Imp this entire conversation. We don't hear her say anything, but we have her tone. We have like her character comes through in just what Lisa's repeating, what Lisa's reacting to. Like, it's all there. We have a very clear understanding of not only what she's saying, but how she's saying it, and the mood that Imp is in right now. I think it's really effective to paint a picture of this character and what she's going through right now without ever having her say a line to us at all. Right. It's great.
Part of that is how well the scene is written. Part of that is the fact that we know Tattletale and Imp well enough that we can fill in her likely behavior here. Yeah,
and I think that's just smart writing, right? Like if you spend the time to, like, I think characterizing early means, and I think we've mentioned this on Worm before, you know, I feel like we've recorded like 800 hours of podcasting by this point, so we're going to repeat ourselves a million times, but if you take the time to set things up, you can leverage that for economical storytelling later. And I think that's what's happening here.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But I think I kind of want to talk about this idea of manipulation here, though, because I think you're absolutely right. This chapter is diving us into this scenario where Tattletale is coaching Imp to manipulate these people. And manipulation has surrounded this arc, right? Teacher's entire plan is about manipulation, manipulating people into taking certain actions, playing off of people's weaknesses, playing off their insecurities, playing off of preconceived biases. That's what Teacher's plan is about. And here, as we open this chapter, in which the full breadth of this plan is going to be revealed, and in a few minutes, we're going to talk about, you know, the red alert that Teacher mentioned, what it is, and we're going to see the full scope of what this plan is. We see Tattletale doing very much the same thing, kind of, right? The strategy here that Tattletale is outlining is Samuel's being a jerk, bring up this moment in his past where he wrote a heartfelt poem to a teacher he really cared about, and he's kind of embarrassed about it. He's really sensitive about it. Bring that up to him to show him that he has weaknesses too. And it's the same thing with Chastity. Chastity might like this pizza delivery guy. Hint that you know about that. And it's manipulation. That's literally what it is. That's literally what she says it is. And I think, you know, talking about our discussion question of last week that we're going to cover at the end of the show, this is a scenario in which Wildbow is constructed to say, as you said, there's no good options here. There's like you have these group of kids that are very damaged, and you're trying to find ways to work around them, and sometimes if you want to stop them or if you want to help them, you have to manipulate them for their own benefits, which is the line that Tattletale says to Imp. If you want to be their ally, you will have to be okay with manipulating them for their own benefits. And I think that's really interesting because that's challenging this idea that manipulation is inherently bad. And this idea that intent matters. The point of teachers' manipulation is to tear people apart, to rip them down, to weaken relationships between people, to, as we'll see, weaken the already fragile relationship between capes and non-capes. And here, the point, the goal, the intent of Tattletale's manipulation is to keep people together, to not allow others to destroy what one group is building. And that intent is so important.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that leadership is manipulation.
Right.
And Victoria, that's the same thing she's doing, right? It's just that her team doesn't require the same kind of, shall we say, underhanded manipulation that, for example, the Heartbroken do. Like, you have to literally threaten and cajole the Heartbroken to keep them in line. Whereas Breakthrough, you just have to kind of provide them with a positive vision of what they can be and help them push back against their worst impulses and avoid their trauma hotspots and all that stuff. So basically, if Victoria had some more troublesome teammates to deal with, then she might find herself in the same position, right? And I think it's telling that Victoria and Sveta are kind of skeezed out by the way Tattletale is speaking, but neither of them can really say anything about it, right? Because they're like, well, it is the Heartbroken that she's talking about.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I love this that we're complicating things here, because you're absolutely right. I think Victoria is manipulating her group, and I think that word has such a negative connotation attached to it, right? Like, how could manipulating someone be good? How could it?
Yeah.
But I think there are instances where it is, and the Victoria's diary made up the intent of the manipulation, right? But it didn't really completely make up the fact that she was influencing and pushing and trying to manipulate people for their best interest. That's very similar to what Tattletale is doing here, although hers is a little more overt, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of when right after she read the diary, and then she was talking to her team and feeling like very hollow about it, because she was basically sitting there second guessing everything that she was saying. Even if a little bit subconsciously, like this feels like manipulation, what I'm saying right now, even though, I mean, which it is. It's just that it was skewed in a way where it was completely self-serving instead of being about helping the person.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think there's this kind of black and white nature that we kind of look at words like manipulation and things like this, especially when we're comparing the things that teacher is doing to what we consider good and bad behavior. And I think this opening, Tattletale, everything Victoria has gone through in this arc shows that these things are more complicated than that. And sometimes there is no easy answer. Sometimes manipulating someone for their own benefits is the best option.
Right. Yeah.
As shitty as that seems.
I think it's kind of fitting that in this arc where she has partnered essentially with this villain, we're seeing her at her most sort of uncertain, right? I feel like maybe an earlier chapter, Victoria might have had some more kind of clear objections to what Tattletale was saying, but
yeah,
she's been hanging out with Tattletale for a whole arc. They've been actually getting along pretty well for all the fact that there's kind of a repartee going on, kind of where they're poking at each other. They actually have made a lot of progress, and they actually work pretty well as a team. And she can't deny that at this point.
Yeah. I mean, especially as we move into, the conclusion of these chapters, where we see a Victoria who is just kind of exhausted by the fact that none of her ways of solving problems are working anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
So there's one more thing I wanted to point out here before we move on. And that's like, as Victoria is listening to Tattletale and kind of appalled by her manipulation, we get this little bit with the mask. My leg kept his head stable, while my other leg was a spot for my mask to rest on, black with gold tracery. It stared at me, accusatory. Or maybe it was accusing of everything it looked at. Which is, I mean, it's perfect. Like we've kind of talked about the use of the mask throughout this entire arc, and the moments in which Victoria puts it on and takes it off, and I love the duality of it here, where it's staring at me. Like if we go back to the executioner's hood bit that you mentioned when we first brought up the mask, like it's staring at her. This is a version of herself that she has had to go into in the past, and she's not sure she feels about it. But also, the mask allows her to be accusing, to judge people as guilty or not guilty, those around her. And I think we'll see the mask used that way in these ongoing chapters. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I like that particular phrasing of it, to see people as guilty or not guilty. Yeah, I'll think about that. So then they move on to talking about the implications of the brooms. So of course, what happened previously was Semiramis told them about the fact that Engel had seen people with brooms, and then they tried to hide the fact they had brooms. So of course, characters think of everything that we thought of, and then some. Tattletale saying it's possible she being custodian is gone, but it's also possible it means she's taking breaks, going on errands, or it means teacher might be anticipating having to replace her. So like, I just love this because it's the fact that the author has thought of the things that you have thought of, and that we're not just making shit up as we go along, is just so refreshing.
It is a little validating, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's funny that Victoria uses these brooms as a good way of kind of transitioning away from the uncomfortable Barb conversation that's going on between Sveta and Lisa right now. Mm-hmm. Like their conversation's ramping up again, and they're really coming close to being really rude to each other. And it's like she's sweeping it under the rug. But yeah, I mean, I think the part of that got me really interested was this might be anticipating having to replace her, right?
Yeah.
Because it was so funny, because it made me think back to the Overseer chapter, and we saw in this chapter that the Overseer values herself extremely high in the hierarchy of this organization. We see that maybe she might have a little something for Teacher, like she gives Teacher a kiss at one point. I don't think we mentioned that in the episode, but that does happen in the chapter. But we did just finish talking about how Teacher's like whole deal is manipulation. So like, what if this is just the custodian / overseer thinking she's in charge and the most important part of this organization, and just a temporary thing that Teacher plans to trash as soon as he doesn't need her anymore? It should be very on brand for Teacher.
Yeah, maybe. I feel like that's probably not it, honestly, but it's more like Tattletale is thinking through all of the consequences that it could mean, instead of just jumping to the first conclusion. Like, yeah. I mean, I think honestly, her going on errands is the most likely reason for why.
Yeah, I'm actually not like saying that like this line is supposed to make us go down that line of thinking. I'm just saying like that made me think about that whole relationship, and
sure,
like the kind of the uncertainty around that relationship, where if you would ask Overseer, she'd be pretty convinced that, no, I'm like the most important person in this organization. I'm the Overseer.
Sure.
But I don't think Teacher probably feels that same way.
I think you're right. And I think that the dialogue itself makes you ask that question.
Mm-hmm.
You have to think it over. Think, well, could she be right about that? And you actually, as you're reading, sit there and you think, I hadn't considered the possibility that Teacher might be having to replace her or something. And then you think through it and you come to your own conclusion. But the point is, the story has kind of prompted you.
Yeah, I think that's
So I like this specific interaction that happens here, where Lisa says, we need two things, and then Victoria interjects before she can say what those things are, that one of them is a way to stop it, deny him what he wants. And we know from previous moments that this is a typical way that Victoria thinks about fighting villains that she got from her mom. We figure out what they want and we deny them that. And Lisa replies sort of, I would say we need a chink in the armor. And the second thing would be standing in authority. And Victoria certainly thinks often in terms of appearances, relationships, and leadership. So I just really like how they both have their own like pragmatic philosophy about how to fight their enemies. And there's a definite overlap between them with Lisa framing it in terms of chink in the armor, Victoria framing it as a way to stop them. It's just that there are definite distinctions between those two ideas, and in terms of the ways they think, not only how they express it, but what the underlying idea is, and what they focus on in general. And I think that that's kind of, first of all, it's cool that these characters are so full flesh that they seem to have their own independent philosophies here that make sense, but also that there's a bit of overlap that I think is, I think the overlap and the fact that they're slightly distinct is the reason that they make a pretty good team here.
Yeah, I agree, because if they were it's so funny because they feel like they're completely opposite of each other, and that's kind of why they butt heads so often.
Right.
But yeah, if there wasn't overlap, we wouldn't see them able to work together at all. So I think you're absolutely right that this does show a kind of bleed between their two philosophies.
Yeah.
I kind of like this too, because I think Victoria is all about, like, throughout this entire chapter, or at least the first part of this chapter, she's looking at the clock. She's watching the time countdown. It's like, we went 45 minutes till this thing's going to happen, 21 minutes, blah, blah, blah. And she's still very much in the, we can stop this from happening type of mode. Lisa knows, but doesn't reveal it quite this moment, that it's already too late. It's too late to stop it. Like, we're at the point now where we're not going to be able to stop it. We just have to be in the best position possible to weather the storm and be able to counterattack or survive it. And I think it's really fascinating to me that, like, she tells her this a little bit later, but not right in this moment, right? Like, she could have just shot her down right here and said, no, we can't stop it yet. And it's not till a little bit later where she sees Victoria looking at the clock again and stressing out about the clock, that she's like, hey, it's too late for that kind of stress. We have a whole different set of stressors that we have to deal with right now.
Yeah, it's almost like a gentle kind of manipulation where she knows that Victoria will react badly to hearing that it's too late, so she just kind of holds that back.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Tattletale at this point says that Sveta reminds her of Gru, specifically the new Sveta, who is coming into her own, in Tattletale's words, or just being really abrasive and aggressive in a different framing.
Yeah.
So I wonder what she means exactly by this. Like, is this post-second trigger Gru that she reminds her of?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'm not sure. Like, I have to be honest, like, post-second trigger Gru to me is kind of this amorphous blob of
easily pushed around, right?
Yeah.
Like,
he's just suffered so much that, like, it feels like he's barely there most of the time. So
yeah. So I agree. I don't think that's right, but I'm not sure exactly what that means.
Well, I mean, the thing that I like about it is, like, Victoria is, like, shocked by this comparison, right? Like, Victoria is like, that's, like, I think she says, like, on a list of 25 people that I think you would be referring to, there's no way that he would even make that list.
Yeah.
And I think this is like great, because from the outside, Gru is this scary guy with the black spooky smoke and this skull mask. But we know Brian. Tattletale knows Brian. We know Brian was, like, out of everyone on the Undersiders, was the one that was, like, trying, mostly in vain, to get people to just, like, chill,
right.
Just, like, hold back and just, like, maybe not embrace your most violent and terrible tendencies. So I love that, like, Victoria, like, doesn't have that read of him at all, because she's never really known that person. But I think that's when I see this comparison, that's the one that I made, right? Like this person willing to step up and be like, no, hang on.
Yeah.
And I think that to me, that's what I pulled from it. I don't know.
And Gru and Tattletale did clash more than I would say I mean, certainly more than Taylor clashed with either of them, right? Because,
Yeah.
for example, Gru was always the one urging restraint. Tattletale was always relatively more confident. Like in the bank robbery, Tattletale wanted to go through with it. Gru didn't. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I
think that could be it. Yeah.
I also think that's interesting because I think a lot of like Taylor never really directly clashed with Brian that often. And I think a lot of that has to do with, their feelings for each other influencing that. But through her proxy of good old enabler Lisa, they were able to have that kind of a proxy fight between Tattletale and Brian. I think you're right. So yeah, I mean, I like that. I'm not sure if that's exactly what it's going for, but I like that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So Victoria ends up messaging Dragon with some of the details of what's going on, despite Tattletale eventually saying that she shouldn't. And Tattletale actually changes her mind here, which I think is a really interesting moment.
Yeah, I mean, this is the moment that we were talking about earlier where Tattletale dishes to Victoria that this plan is happening no matter what. This is like, I think as part of her maybe trying to convince her that messaging Dragon is not a good idea, she finally plays that card, but it doesn't really work. And you're right that Victoria goes against Tattletale's wishes and just does it anyway. And Tattletale still is not sure at the end, but yeah, there's this really great moment where she's like, Tattletale nodded for what might have been 10 seconds before saying okay. And it's like you can almost see her power working as she's going through that. Like she's okay, if her power is linking and jumping to conclusions based off of okay, she's gonna message her and yeah, I mean, like she could have rolled her eyes, she could have pushed back, she could have been snarky Lisa that we've seen so many times before, and we'll see again before this week's reading is out. But yeah, in this moment, she's just like, okay.
Yeah. Well, and I liked it because, I mean, yeah, I think she was thinking it through, and I think she may have been consulting her power in addition to just thinking it through. But I think it was the fact that she extended some trust to Victoria that was actually kind of cool to see. That she basically said, "Don't do it," and Victoria's like, "I'm going to do it," and then instead of arguing back, she kind of you see her thinking like, "I'm just gonna." I don't think she's trusting Victoria blindly. I think she is kind of calculating through the ramifications of it. But yeah, it's like she's taking Victoria's lead here, and I like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Lisa even admits here that she's not 100% sure. She's like, it might help. It might hurt us. It might hurt us in the long run, even if it helps in the short term. She's not 100% sure. And yeah, so that is a measure of trust being extended to say, okay, I'm not 100% sure where this will lead. I'm going to trust your judgment on this one without being a jerk about it.
And Victoria doesn't explicitly think about it in these terms, but this actually does qualify, I think, as reaching out. She has this information. She's tempted to hold on to it because it could backfire, but she chooses to instead reach out with it, even though it's risky. And it seems by the end of this chapter like it was a good choice, or by the end of this couple of chapters.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So they move on. They go to Miss Treats, which is a place to meet with the K-53s who Semiramis had told them about. So yeah, Miss Treats. It's basically a S&M tea shop. And I'm not really into the scene, so I can't really do the description full justice.
It's like the mullet of tea shops. It's business in the front, party in the back.
I like that idea.
Yeah, we also learned that Perian is a regular here, Matt, which, no kink shaming, of course, but didn't know that's what she was into. I guess, like, if your power is to, like, control thread, you're probably pretty into, like, binding.
Yeah. I mean, the shards take what they're given. So
there you go. You turned into a shard thing. I hadn't even gone there.
So inside the back of the tea house, the party section, if you will, we meet Egg. Oh my gosh. Engel and Scraping. Egg is an egg. His skin is eggshell, which cracks with his movement leaking albumin and general goo everywhere. I really hope that there's some awesome benefit that comes with that. Engel has an emotion and synesthesia power, which sounds really pleasant, actually, if you're not Victoria. and scraping is just like flayed and stuff. Again, hope there's some awesome side benefit to that power.
He has like a constant ruffled shirt.
Yeah, he's got the fluffy pirate shirt.
Yeah, that's made of skin.
With his own flayed skin.
How does Wildbow come up with this stuff? No. Like, egg is disgusting in like the most incredible way. Like, I just look at this description. It's so good. It broke when he moved, with membrane beneath the shell holding it mostly together, and the regular breaking that came with blinking leading to a crumb trail at his cheekbones. Where a part was still for a moment, the cracks closed up, only to break again when that part moved. Here and there, blood mixed in with white vitreous and thick yellow yolk weeped out of the biggest cracks. His clothing was normal, a sweater and slim jeans. Oh good, I'm glad his clothing's normal. But it looked as though he were wearing a plastic layer beneath. His head was hairless and smooth on each side, with a shock of yolk yellow hair on top, and the same kind of liquid thin as corn silk. Like, it's tactile and gross and wonderful. I just like the body horror fan in me was just like, yeah.
I know it's so gross. And of course the fact that it's egg, and then we've got the whole egg thing going on in the background of the story.
This constant motif of egg everything.
Yeah,
we went on hard boil. We don't like eggs.
Yeah,
Cradle's thing was an egg. There's eggs everywhere.
Already an egg made of people once, and here's another egg person.
It was an entire egg made of people, and this is a people made of egg.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, we get to know this trio of Case 53s, and we understand their close knit kind of sibling like interactions.
Yeah, I love their interactions, right? I think it's really fascinating that how they kind of ping off each other in not exactly the same, but similar ways to how our trio of detectives are pinging off each other. I mean, it's different personalities, like there's different relationships, but like we have these two groups that are one's trying to get information from the other, and everyone has their own shit internally, and then everyone has their own shit across the table as well. I think there's just a really well constructed scene where we've got these 6 people sitting at a table trying to get to a common purpose, while hate and vitriol and anger is being tossed both sides at each other, at themselves. It's just, I think it's great. I think it's well constructed.
Yeah, it's a really great scene, right? Because I don't know, like there's so much of this arc that's been them following leads. They find the people they want to talk to, and then it could just be like they find a person, you know, like Law and Order, you know, the person is like stacking boxes, because in Law and Order they're always stacking boxes while talking to the detective, and then they just very, you know, quickly summarize the information the detective leads, and then they're like, I got my lunch break in 5 minutes, this better be quick.
Yeah,
I've watched way too much Law and Order.
Clearly.
But instead, every single person that they've encountered in their investigation, it's been this little kind of short story window into the lives of these fully fleshed out characters.
Yeah.
And not just in terms of like being an entertaining little diversion, but like, oh, this is enriching kind of the palette that we're painting this arc with, and the ideas we're bringing into it, and the situation that we're setting up.
Yeah, because I mean, you're absolutely right, because as we're going through this journey of Victoria trying to find who did these things to her, we are constantly coming up in contact with other people who have their own lives, their own issues, that also were manipulated in some ways. And I think that is great that we get to see that. I mean, that's like the secret of detective stories, is the interview is the most interesting part. It's always the most interesting part. And you're right that so many of these police procedurals like skip over that part because they just want to get on to something else, especially Law and Order that has to do the whole trial half in the back. Like the police part of Law and Order is just like, yeah, we got him, yada, it's lawyers.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, like I love it. I think it's great. And I think Wildbow understands that the interview is the best part. And that's what this arc was. It's a series of interviews with people that have been wronged, just like Victoria has.
That's awesome. Yeah. I never really articulated that to myself, that the interview is the best part. I mean, I certainly agree that was the best part of the Tana French book that we read a while back.
And since we read that book, I've read every single one of them, some multiple times. And let me tell you, still true.
Still true. Okay. Well, good. So let's move on to talk about Engel a bit. Now that we've talked about Egg.
All right.
So Victoria can't handle Engel's power, and it seems to affect her in a qualitatively different way than it affects others, because it reminds her of the time when she was in love with Amy. She's basically just extremely creeped out by it.
Yeah.
And the description goes like, until this woman with a voice that tasted and felt like biting into brownies fresh from the oven started talking as a pretty fucking close tactile and taste approximation to the contentment of being in love and being with the person you loved, which wasn't not the hospital room, but scenes before it, before my mom had pounded on the door. And so I love everything about that. I love the kind of like synesthetic description of what it feels like to be around this cape that really kind of brings you into that moment, even though it's a really hard thing to describe. But also I love this notion that like, not something I think the story has ever directly stated in this way, but like Victoria was actually really happy in the hotel room with Amy or whatever it was, the room where Amy was continually freaking out, trying to fix her body and continually fucking it up even worse.
Yeah.
And her mom coming and banging on the door was actually like, in her mind, a terrible invasion and tragedy because her mom took Amy away from her. And this might even like be a factor in what she resents her mom for in some way. Like,
yeah,
like being mature about it. She knows that her mom saved her, but in that moment, I'm sure she blamed her mom for taking Amy away from her.
Yeah, I mean, your brain's being manipulated to feel that way. So
yeah,
I think she probably did. And yeah, I mean, this is tragic and horrifying, but like from a character perspective, I love this so much because this is we see Victoria here spiral and zone out in a way in which she has not done since almost the beginning of the novel, right? She has almost never gotten this bad. And Sveta has to like coach her back into reality. That's how bad it got, because it's just so great, because like we've seen Victoria make progress over the course of this story. She's able to mention Amy. She's able to think about Amy. She's able to think about her time in the hospital and these things without spiraling as much.
Yeah.
But this is like a whole nother angle that she's never really had to deal with before, right? Like this is like you said, the tactile and taste approximation of being in love and being with the person you loved. She doesn't go back to the hospital here. She doesn't go back to any of that stuff. It's this specific moment, and that like she's just completely inequipped to deal with that sensation. And I love this because it's like this perfect encapsulation of how tricky trauma can be. Mm-hmm. You put in the work, you've developed certain coping strategies, you've grown better and are able to deal with things, and then your sneaky ass trauma hits you from an angle you didn't even consider, you didn't think was coming. You've never had to specifically process that feeling. And it's almost as if all that work doesn't even matter anymore in the moment. Of course it does, but it just feels like it doesn't in the moment. And that's, I think, what we're seeing here is just like, this is an angle of attack into Victoria's central trauma that she's just not really had to directly process in this way before. And we're seeing a complete inability to do anything about it.
It's really interesting because she's dealt with Lord of Lost, she's dealt with Snag, she's dealt with Rain, she's dealt with Love Lost, and man, I think I'm literally forgetting emotional powers that she's had to deal with in the story. Yeah. And all of those were like basically explicitly negative experiences where the emotion power was an attack. This is an emotion power that's actually, at least on face, I would suspect, supposed to kind of make you predisposed toward Engel and make you like want to be around her. Like it's a kind of like seductive, positive emotion power. Yeah. But because of Victoria's particular trauma, like you said, it sneaks right up on her. And yes, she comes into this scene somewhat off balance. She's off balance from the start of this arc where she feels rejected by Jessica. She feels alienated from the team because of that. And this is catching her unawares. But yeah, I think you're right that it just so happens that this is like her Achilles heel.
Yeah, it's so great. I love that you picked that out. That she's gotten really good at dealing with the negative emotions, but a positive emotion. What? I am not equipped. I am not equipped with a positive emotion being linked to my trauma. No, not ready for that.
Another thing that occurs to me is like, and I don't know how much to read into this, if any, but the fact that she does not think about Dean when she thinks about the idea of being in love and being with the person you love. Like she doesn't flash back to, lazing around in bed with Dean like she has before. She's literally reminisced about like studying in her bedroom with Dean before while being subjected to horrible loss emotion powers. She doesn't think about that while she's having a love and contentment emotion power. So it's very interesting. Again, I don't know what exactly to read into it, but
well, I mean, I think you could, like, I don't want to go too far with this. I mean, I think we've discussed the fact that the Dean relationship is probably more complicated than we've been led to believe, but I think it also just shows the overwhelming power of what Amy did to her. And it makes you like, it's disgusting. It's one thing to like say, oh, well, she made her want her, right? And that's that's very abstract. That's very just like word focused. You don't really have the emotion behind it. But yeah, I mean, this really dives into what that must have felt like and what it feels like to remember what that felt like, knowing it was fake, knowing it was a violation of who you are at your core. And I think just like this dive into that is so beautiful, in a horror, like in a narrative way. Yes.
Right.
I sometimes say these things and I'm not saying like, this is great.
Yes, it's a horror awesome. Yeah.
There you go. And I think the thing that's important here that leads us into a lot of Victoria's choices near the end of this arc is Sveta pulls her out of this, right? Sveta's the one that coaxes her back to reality. That says, here, focus this beautiful line of smell the baked goods, the tea. Think about today, what you did. We sent off the prisoners. You went to drop Lookout off, saw Tattletale. Remember the errands you ran with her. This is just a great centering technique to bring you back to reality. Focus on the things that you've done today, which reminds me that this whole arc has taken place over the course of a day, which is just like, fuck, these days. It's just rough.
Yeah, no, I definitely would have bet money that the conversation with Jessica was not this morning, but it totally was. Yeah.
And this, I mean, so I bring up the Sveta thing just because, like, I think so much of the importance of writing is making moments feel earned. And what we're doing here is we're building to something. We're building to this moment at the end of chapter 11, this moment where Victoria makes a decision that seemingly goes against everything she believes in or had believed in for the sake of a friend. And so this moment is building to that. This moment where Sveta is the person for her there now helping her. Despite all the shit that Sveta's going through right now, she's there for her. And I think that's an important way of showing the process of building to understand the choice that Victoria makes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, I mean, like, especially as we're approaching it, it's very important that we feel that that choice is justified. Absolutely.
Yeah, Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I have that same cough. Yeah. So sorry. So they discuss what Angle and Egg remember from their visit to Teacher's Base, including details on the probable locations of the portals that they use to get in. So basically we're learning about vulnerabilities. Tattletale informs them that having participated in the investigation like they are right now has now put them on Teacher's radar, which is, I feel like that's at least partly Tattletale just manipulating them into coming along to the Wardens. Like, she didn't need to say that, right? She didn't need to alert them to that fact. And I don't even know if Teacher would particularly care to go after them at this point. But Tattletale wants them to come along to serve as witnesses.
Yeah, and I like that you use the word manipulation again, because I think you're right that is at least partially what she's doing, and it's all over this chapter. And yeah, I mean, this kind of, it works, but it escalates the conflict here a bit because they are mad, and they are mad at Sveta specifically, or at least Egg is mad at Sveta specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's set aside a moment here to talk about how Sveta specifically is doing, because it's easy to fixate on how Victoria's doing because she's the point of view, and this is a really unpleasant situation for Victoria, but like it's also a really unpleasant situation for Sveta, and well, it's been a really horrible day. Like as bad of a day as this has been for Victoria, I think it's been a worse day for Sveta, honestly. And this is just about the worst day for her to have to face Egg and Engel and Scraping and be put in this situation with them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and that thing, like, I think you and I have been talking about how afraid we are of Sveta or the potential of what Sveta's going through blowing up in a big way for arcs now.
Yeah.
And I just I feel so bad. Like I'm just selling her so short, right? Like I know she's going through a lot. I know she's got a long way forward, but I'm really impressed by how much she's holding shit together in these moments.
Yeah.
I mean, like, and this moment, you're absolutely right that this moment with this case 53 is just designed to attack her in like the place where she's most insecure, right? Like this whole interaction. I love the back and forth of this interaction because the way Wildbow established this is if you have Engel, who is this person that seemingly at the start of the conversation is like totally on her side, right? Like we've missed the talks. I love your arms. Sveta is like, I had a whole body and it got trashed. And she said, I'm so sorry, honey. And I think the use of honey there is really great because it's just like this warming, endearing word that like, and you see that like Sveta eases up in her tension. The darkness on her face clears up again. And Victoria says she looks more like my friend again. And then Egg swoops in and drops his until she betrayed us. And that's kind of the way the conversation goes, right? It's like if Engel like sticks up for her, says something nice for her, Egg is there to back it down and make it worse again. And it's just I can't imagine that in the midst of everything she's going through. Yeah.
Egg is shitty. Hope somebody
very shitty.
So
very
somebody
shitty.
cracks him. It's absolutely brutal. And I mean, it's like doubly brutal. I mean, I don't want to skip ahead too much, but the fact that Engel is being so nice and then like just completely stabs her in the back as they're getting into the car later, it just makes it so much worse.
That's the twist of the knife, really.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the moment that leads directly up to her accidentally hurting Victoria's finger, which is like, again, the most we've seen her lose control, which is very impressive.
Right. True.
No, I kind of just want to keep going down all this stuff. Like I literally copy pasted a page here because like I think all this is just so great. Like Egg says there is no us, and Sveta just kind of brushes it off and keeps going. Like tells more information about like clarifying information about Cauldron headquarters. And then this all kind of comes to a head at the end of the conversation where Sveta is saying, I didn't want this. And Egg says, don't. I didn't. And then he goes on his full out rant. And I kind of wanted to read this because I think this is important.
Yeah.
You said you didn't want what happened before either, but we're playing through it in fast forward now. You told me you were sorry once, but sorry doesn't mean shit if... Egg stopped. He made a fierce enough expression and talked violently enough that it had cracked his chin open. He wiped at the mess and left a streak of red across the line of his jaw. That hand held his jaw together as he finished. Doesn't mean shit if you don't learn from it, or change anything, or make amends. I'm helping people. Like you were when you were with us, except you're repeating the exact same old mistakes, and you want to waltz into our lives, earn our trust, and fuck us over again, exactly as before. So... I want us to zoom back to this moment of betrayal a bit, right? Because like per Glowworm, Egg was one of the ones that was there at Cauldron HQ the day that they invaded and Weld and Sveta decided to stand between them and their justice. And as a refresher from all the people that don't remember, the irregulars invaded Cauldron as the world was ending and they wanted to get their revenge. Sveta and Weld were not all about brutally killing all the people. Everyone else in the irregulars were. They stood in their way and stopped them and prevented them from getting their revenge. And then were even more upset with Sveta after she said that I killed Dr. Mother. And it's like, oh, so you stopped us from doing it and then you did it yourself?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely like I think it is easy to forget about all of this stuff that is in the background with Sveta, because again, we're stuck in Victoria's head. We're not necessarily remembering like why this is so hard for Sveta. So the story does have to go out of its way to remind us of that.
Yeah. But I do wonder, the reason why I kind of I dove into this and checked out Glowworm again and reminded myself of the specifics of this whole thing is because I don't know. Did you get the feeling here that like, I feel like there's something more going on here a little bit. And I don't know why I feel that way, but it's just like something about the way Egg described this situation. Like you waltz into our lives, earn our trust, and fuck us over again. Like I just feel like there's I'm really curious about what Egg's actual perspective is on this whole thing. Like I want to see what Sveta and Weld did from the mind of an irregular. You know? Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember if we've ever said this on the show before, but it is interesting that like they just hate her so much. And
yeah,
at least part of you is, I mean, I think a big part of me was always just like, well, people love to form cliquish, like fuck that person type, like mob mentality where that person really didn't do anything objectively wrong. It's just that we've all decided that we're going to define our little group by hating them. But I absolutely think that you have a point that it's possible that we are missing something. Sveta may have actually done something beyond what we are made aware of, currently in the story that would actually, to some degree, justify or at least more than our current opinion, which is that it's not justified at all, support their behavior.
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially like we've been reminded twice in this arc now of the fact that Weld did this too, and they hate me way more than they hate him. And yes, like there is a level that you're like, well, everything she says is correct. That like he's a very personable, like good looking built dude, right? That just like is. Everyone kind of likes, like the celebrity kind of guy. So that makes sense on a very logical level of like why you would blame the tentacle squid thing more than the like literal Man of Steel. But yeah, I mean, I feel like we've been reminded this thing more times. I don't know if I'm just barking up a ridiculous tree or not, but it just kind of, the first time I read this, I was kind of, it feels weird to say like shocked about just how bitter he is about the specifics of the betrayal. Like it's just like, we wanted to kill someone.
Yeah.
You said I don't want to kill them, and so now like the level of betrayal seems like incongruous a little bit.
It is like if you take it at the assumptions that we have, then Egg is having one of those like, are we the baddies moments where he's like, you didn't let me bathe in her blood like I wanted to.
Right.
Fuck you. And it's like, how do you not know how crazy you sound, Egg?
Yeah.
And how does everyone around you not like act really freaked out by that? But but they don't, which I agree. Like, and I agree with you that it almost begs for an explanation that we've heard a couple of times from Sveta, that everyone hates her much more than they hate Weld. And yes, you're tempted to supply your own explanation, but it seems like now that it's been mentioned twice, it's going to be explained more explicitly. Why do they hate her more than Weld?
Yeah, and that's not to say that people can't have entirely stupid, irrational reasons that don't make any sense. People absolutely can have that, but I do think that the fact that the story has circled this a few times does beg that question. I think you're right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Conspiracy theories, Scott, at it again. We'll see.
Right. You and your conspiracy theories. So speaking of Glowworm, Scott, I went back and I looked at it, and Sveta specifically communicates with Engel via like a thread, although I don't know if they actually recognize each other's existence. Engel posts in a thread, and Whippersnap is the one who PMs her. And in their discussion, which is mainly just Whippersnap being shitty to her, he actually states that Egg was the only one to make it back from Cauldron. So that's interesting, right? Like, the only one. Literally all those other K-53s. Like, am I interpreting that right?
I think so. I didn't read the whole chapter. I didn't read the whole interaction. But
yeah, I believe it said that he's the only one who made it back.
Yeah, I mean that also helps to explain the bitterness, right? That like we didn't get our revenge, and she lived, and I watched every one of my true friends die. Yeah,
maybe I'm misinterpreting that. Anyway,
I mean, something I did pick up when and this is completely tangential, but I read parts of this chapter of Glowworm today, and I forgot that Capricorn was also posting in the thread that Sveta's posting in because he's like backing up Weld, and like at the time didn't think anything of that, but now we know that Tristan super into Weld.
Yeah.
So it's just like it's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Right.
Going back to read Glowworm, if none of you guys have gone back to read sections of Glowworm yet, I really recommend you do it. It's really fascinating. It's eye-opening. It's wonderful. Like it kind of proves that at least broadly the strokes and beats of these characters were established, from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, right. So Tattletale, from here, Tattletale states that the plan is to travel together to the former warden's headquarters, and then she just like makes eye contact with Victoria, and Victoria correctly interprets this as a signal that this is a decoy plan.
Yeah. What I love about this is this Victoria's interpretation of what Lisa is doing relies on the use of trust me, and then she says, well, she knows I'd never trust her, therefore she must be playing some mind games. But by cracking the code, she's inherently trusting her, right? Like she's trusting that Tattletale knows that she would. Yeah, like it's trust. Like that is what it is. Like it's like saying I would never trust her, but by supporting this and going along with this, that is a level of trust that she has to like worm her way around because she can't come right out and say it. Yes, I will trust you, Lisa.
Yeah.
She doesn't say that.
I'm just going to say it. That they have great teamwork together, but it's just hilarious that Victoria bends over backwards to avoid internally acknowledging that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
So they then head outside to get in the car, and Engel goes out of her way to be horrible to Sveta. And at this moment, both Victoria and Tattletale step up to defend her. Yeah,
I think you're right. I think the emphasis on Tattletale there was important.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like this is just, you're absolutely right. This is almost worse than what Egg did. At least Egg was upfront with his nastiness, and Engel is like playing this long game where she's like, "Oh, you have arms. I'm so happy for you. Oh, I'm so sorry you lost your body." And then she's like, "I'm grieving for my friend Sveta."
Yeah, you're dead to me is what that means.
Yeah, basically, you are here, but she isn't. It's just like, fuck you. Like it's so. Yeah, and Tattletale does jump to her defense, and I think it's because even Lisa, snarky asshole Lisa, recognizes how just fucked up that is.
Yeah.
And probably is getting a good read on how bad Sveta is actually doing in these moments. Ugh.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, basically, earlier when I mentioned like the way Tattletale thinks about fighting her enemies is she thinks about finding chinks in the armor. That's her whole psyche. That's her whole power. She's looking for chinks in the armor. She's looking for weaknesses that they used to actually believe. The PRT used to believe that her power was seeing weaknesses. That's not what it is, but that is how she leverages it, right?
Yeah.
And so she probably is very conscious of the fact that Engel is poking Sveta right in a sore spot, and regardless of whether she likes Sveta or not, she probably finds that a little bit offensive.
Yeah, nobody fucks with people's weaknesses
except me. Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, it's not like Lisa's like a horrible person either. Like I can see her just being like, "Hey, that's too far."
Yeah. I mean, she does have a line. It's way further than most people's lines, but she has one.
Yeah. So they get in the car. Victoria tries to comfort her, and Sveta is so tense that she slightly injures Victoria's finger.
Yeah. I mean, again, this is the closest we've ever seen to Sveta actually just losing control throughout this entire, post-Weld breakup world. And I think that's commendable that this is the most. And like, I feel like, I don't know, Victoria was almost asking for it here, like she dove into her tentacles, and
Right.
it's like this was her desperately trying to give her physical contact because she just wants to make her feel better, and she feels powerless to do so, which again is setting us up for the long game with the decisions she makes.
I like that framing that like normally it would seem like a bit much for her to like shove her hand into the morass of tentacles.
Yeah.
But here it's almost like a desperate like um overwrought gesture of like I'm really here for you. Like like your friend's having a hard time. You grab them around the shoulders so hard that it like hurts. You know, that's kind of what this is almost.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, if anything, like the fact that Sveta hurts her here is probably a bit of it's like the opposite of helpful, right? It's like taking Sveta at this low moment, and now Sveta's hurt her friend.
Yeah, it's unintentional, and there's a lot of unintentional hurting going on in this chapter between these two characters. Because one thing we didn't mention, that the reason the initial trigger the initial trigger for Victoria's spiraling is Angle starts going down a mode of like, oh, she's the one with multiple heads and limbs, and in a rush to defend her, Sveta speaks up and speaks over Angle, which causes Angle to raise her voice a little louder, which like turns on the intensity of the feeling a little bit more. And that's where Victoria the intensity of the voice kind of comes in a little bit more. And finally it causes her to just completely spiral. And it was a completely unintentional thing that Sveta was doing in an attempt to help and defend her friend.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that kind of happens here. And in this desperate attempt to make Sveta feel better at all costs, she might have just made her feel a little bit worse.
So there's a lot of beats of Sveta unintentionally injuring people, which is like her main thing. So yeah. So this line here, I put my eyeless mask on and my hood up, and I told myself it was so I could better fly through the cold wind when and if I had to fly to rescue them.
Yeah.
So the phrasing, I mean, just the delightful, like she's basically hiding, putting on her executioner hood and mask, hiding, and then telling, and then I told myself, meaning basically fully aware that she's telling a story to herself. She's really just shrinking away from everything. She
doesn't even have the energy to bullshit herself at this point, right? Like she's just being totally honest with herself, even as she's doing the action.
Right.
It's amazing. I love it so much. And it's again using the imagery of the mask, this black mask, as a thing that kind of shifts her into a different line of thinking, dehumanizes her more. The executioner, the one that sends people, like she doesn't want to be that. She doesn't want to be the human side right now because it's too hard.
Yeah. So as they are driving, teacher's stroke falls. The full contents of most people's computers are now available online, and she knows the people that she cares about will soon be reading the diary.
Yeah, I mean, and this means everyone, right? Everyone. But I think it's really fascinating to me that, and it's because like what we're doing with this is kind of showing that who teacher is going after specifically here is the Cape human conflict. But the first person she thinks about is Presley, Natalie, and Jester, right? These three non-powered human people in her life that she really likes and respects, and how this could have destroyed everything forever. And this is we find out that that's what the attack was for, a method of not only wedging apart parahumans from each other, but finally ripping that wedge between parahumanity and humanity totally apart. And I think we see that telegraphed through the first people I think about: Presley, Natalie, Jester.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right, because shortly we're going to see that the heroes actually take this pretty well. It doesn't blow the wardens apart,
Yeah.
But we don't see the fallout of the effect it's going to have on the humans.
Yeah. There's no there's no moment where she goes, "Oh no, Sveta's going to read the diary and find out that I knew about Weld."
Right.
There's no moment where she goes, "Oh no, Rain is going to hear all this dragging I'm silently doing of him in my head and is going to be really hurt by it." Like that, she doesn't seem, that's not her first initial concern. And I mean, the point of that, I think, metatextually, is to point us, the reader, towards this idea that the angle of this attack is specific to that festering conflict between humans and parahumans that we've been talking about from the very beginning.
Yeah, right. I almost feel like this has been set up the entire story from the very first chapter.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to read this line here.
Okay.
Earlier, Sveta had brought me back to reality by touching on details around me. Now I abandoned that reality. I turned to thoughts of the hospital room, darkness, and some mixture of stray animals and vermin transmuted into pale, reaching flesh. I remembered watching the clock endlessly until I could hear the tick of it, and the pain I held in my chest mirrored that heart I'd been given that had been made to be broken. Oh, God.
Oh my God, this is like the darkest we've ever seen her, right? This is
Yeah.
like, it's just like, I choose to go to my dark place. I choose to dive into my trauma. I
Right.
choose to dive into the every part of me I've been trying to not think about and ignore. I mean, it gets even worse, right? Where she says like she basically says, okay, if everyone thinks we're monsters, then okay.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna have to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the meaning of her putting on her mask and her like she's
Yeah.
not just hiding. Like I think I don't even necessarily think that she is hiding per se. I think that she's donning this regalia to like reflect how she wants to be right now. It's like when you're in the throes of a breakup and you're intentionally listening to the terribly sad, depressing music. You're
Right.
wallowing and you're self-consciously wallowing. You're wallowing while thinking, fine, fuck it, might as well just wallow. So everything's gonna suck regardless of whether
Right.
it's true that we've never seen her do this before, not to this extent certainly, but this idea that she's intentionally turning her thoughts into these darkest of places that she has. And I mean, I don't want to undercut the seriousness of it and the fact that it is an impactful line, but it's borderline like emo, like the language of like the heart that had been made to be broken.
Oh my God, I love that line so much.
I love it. I love it in a serious way, and I also love that it's just like so dramatic, right? Like she's just diving directly into the drama.
It's angsty as hell, and like the thing that I love about the end of this chapter is like the language. Like even before we get to this dark spot, the language is so final. Like the finality of it. Like when she mentions Natalie and Jester and Presley, she says it was possible a door had permanently closed here. Right? Like she hasn't even fully examined the outcome of what's going to happen here, but it's already like, well, the door is probably permanently closed here. If that door shuts, there's no coming back from it. And that's like her whole attitude around that. And that even like goes right into the next chapter, because like the next chapter starts with like the sentence, the car door slammed with finality, right? Like that's like it's such a good, I know we haven't quite gotten there yet, but it's such a good transition of this overall feeling where it's just like, okay, it's done. It's too late. Might as well just do this now. And that's kind of what Victoria through the rest of tonight's episode is gonna have that central attitude.
I think I agree completely. I mean, it's literally a black mood. Like it's
exactly.
She's in a frame of mind where she is barely even herself. Mm-hmm. Like the things that she says in the course of this chapter, the places she's willing to go are not things that I feel like a Victoria 2 arcs ago would have done.
Yeah.
And, it being a black mood, of course, is perfect.
And the thing that I love about it, and we'll see this in the next chapter, is how much of this is circling around Sveta, right? Because like she says in these moments, even as she's allowing herself to go into this darkness, she says that the Sveta issue is even more pressing than all this other stuff, I feel. So like, I just love how this is and maybe we'll talk about this at the end of the chapter, but this is an arc that opened with, okay, we left 12 and 12 was like, okay, the big problem that Victoria needs to focus on is going to be Sveta. And then all the shit with the diary happened. So then me, the reader, was like, oh, I guess we're not doing Sveta yet, but we've looped back around to it. And now like everything that's happened to Victoria and Sveta in these arcs was leading up to it being, this is the Sveta moment of the story, right? And I just didn't see that coming after the first couple chapters of the arc. And I think it's just fantastic how that was done.
Yeah, it was done in a way, it was kind of my favorite kind of writing, where it makes sense in retrospect from the end of this subsequent chapter we're about to get to. It all makes sense in retrospect, but I couldn't have predicted that like that was the path that it was going to take to get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, let's get into 13.11.
Sure.
And Victoria sets the tone for this chapter with her initial pronouncement. The first thing she says, "I've been a bad friend."
Yeah, and I almost, when I was doing my notes, I almost was like, Matt, has she been a bad friend? And I almost like asked that, and I wanted to have a discussion about that. But then I realized that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if whether or not Victoria has actually been a bad friend or not, because she thinks she does. She thinks she is, and that is part of what motivates her actions in this chapter. Like I just said, even as Teacher's Plan broke out, she still prioritizes the Sveta issue. It was more pressing. I have to help her. I have to help her. I have to solve her problem. Even all this other stuff is happening. I have to do that. And that helps explain the choice she makes at the end of this chapter.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that Victoria is this true hero. Like, she has this true hero mentality, even though she doesn't let herself see herself that way, even though she sees herself as this like fallen, impure hero type. She is this hero who she's always going to put everyone before herself. She does try to take care of herself, but if her friends are in need, she's going to put them first. And in her mind, she's being a bad friend because she's not taking care of Sveta.
Yeah, because she hasn't solved her problem yet.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. Like, I certainly don't think Victoria's been a bad friend. I think that Victoria, within her worldview, that is what she expects of herself.
Yeah. It's hiding your best friend's boyfriend breaking up with her. It's not great.
That's not great.
That's not great.
She didn't handle that the super wellest.
The super wellest.
No.
I love that.
No. So minor thing here that I just love about this story and the way it's written is this Victorianism where she just repeats what the person said when she can't think of what to say.
Yeah.
Like when Sveta says, maybe, she's talking about Weld, maybe not a relationship role model, but Weld as a hero? Absolutely. Absolutely, I echoed Sveta.
Yeah. But I mean, not only is the repeating things of Victorianism, but the noting to herself that she's doing this is also a Victoria thing. Like, it's not enough for her to just, I don't know what to say, repeat, but she has to say to herself that she's doing this. She has to explain to herself, this is the best I can do. And it's like she needs to give herself permission to do nothing but just repeat the person by going through this internal monologue of why I'm just repeating myself. I think that's so Victoria.
Yeah. It's just a subtle thing that really brings the character to life.
Yeah.
I've been like feeling for this character so much, this arc, that it takes really excellent writing to put you in that space where you're like, oh, poor Victoria, and like your brain, as far as your brain is concerned, this is a real person, this is your friend you care about.
Yeah.
So inside the warden's headquarters, the lighting has inverted. The lighting now comes from where the shadows had been earlier in the day, and there's darkness where the light had been, and it's all reversed and thematic.
Yeah, I don't want to dwell on this for too long because I think it kind of like it's self-explanatory a little bit, right?
Kinda,
There's not much to say about it, but like it's perfect. Like it's not even just the lighting has inverted. The light from the windows was soft. This light is sharp. And like Victoria, it's not just that this thematic lighting change is there. It's that angsty, bad mood Victoria is like treasuring that. It's like, yes, this is the lighting that fits what we do here. Like when we disposed of the prisoners earlier today, it should have been this lighting because this is the right lighting. It so maps wonderfully to her mood here. I mean, even the use of like dispose of the prisoners, she specifically says that it's like, this should be the lighting when we dispose of the prisoners. And it's like, that has a very specific connotation to it. And it's just such a great way of capturing her mood. Like that's this whole early part of the story is just doing overtime to capture her specific mood, and it works really well.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, not much to add to that. Yeah. She walks up to the front desk, and the receptionist says, "Can I help you, Antares?" Heavy question, Tattletale said, quiet enough I wasn't sure the receptionist caught it. I avoided reacting. Oh my God, cool it, Lisa.
Right? Oh my God, Lisa. Like, I don't want to overthink this. That's what we do. But do you think maybe like this return to kind of barbed Lisa might be her picking up on a little bit of Victoria's black mood right now? Like that, like she's now shifted to like a much darker mood than she had earlier in the last chapter, where we kind of saw Lisa maybe back off of the poking at Victoria a little bit, and now it's back because she's like picking up this bad mood that she's in. I don't know.
She definitely needles people more when she is afraid, off balance, herself compromised. She definitely does it more when she gets her power headaches. So I think the fact that she's making these kind of like unnecessary jabs, especially when she should know that Victoria is like on the edge of snapping, is maybe a sign that she's not doing so hot herself.
Yeah. Well, her power is probably like looking at Victoria and going, "Danger, Will Robinson."
Yeah, right. She's going to betray you in like 1 minute.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly.
So Lisa continues to poke Victoria's wounds as they ascend the stairs. And then she gets chucked, quote unquote, chucked through a portal into a snowy dimension prison.
Just throwing people, which I mean, it's very like the prison world. Like she just threw Tattletale into the prison world, and yes, they know where she is, and it's like a specific part of the prison world that she's going to be safe. But it's like, this is where we throw the bad people to die. Go hang out there for a bit.
Yeah, right. We'll get back to you probably.
Yeah. But I just love like the moment leading up to this little bit right here. Like I think encapsulates this trio's entire relationship. So Victoria says, "You're being annoying," I told her. "Surprisingly annoying." "Very," Sveta echoed. "I'm just being me," Tattletale said. And that's like quintessential there, right? Like you have Victoria annoyed at her, but like good old like wants to maybe see the best in people. Victoria is like, it's surprising how annoying you're being. Like I still would expect better of you. And then Sveta's just like turning the knife a little bit, and then Tattletale's just like, "Hey, this is just me." I think that's just like a perfect encapsulation of their entire relationship in 3 lines.
I agree. I love it. So they're still with the old man. I like this language here. He had a bit of a creepy vibe. It sucked that my feelings about the guy were so mixed. On the one hand, creepy reverse cannibal. On the other, he was a survivor of a kind we really didn't have enough of. Every minute, hour, or day he lived, he was blazing new ground, as far as I knew, raising the bar for all of us. It's just, we talked last week about this interesting way that she has of seeing the old man, what he means to her.
Yeah.
And here, it's basically she's explaining that a little bit more, explicating it for us. This idea that she wants to learn from him. I think she thinks all capes can learn from him. How does he do it?
Yeah. Well, and I think she's raising the bar on that a little bit here too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how much of this is tied to this internal feeling that she hasn't even, said yet, which is that fuck non-capes. Like she's always placed she's always kind of placed a priority on the cape side, right? Like that was her big, dividing point with Yamada, which is how much the focus on the cape stuff versus the human stuff. And she's always valued, success in capedom. And that's what he represented the first time she kind of went through this stuff in her head. But now in this moment where she's about to be like, let's stop considering the lay people. She's once again saying, look at this guy, like capes. Yeah. Fuck everyone else. Like, I just like, I wonder how much of this is connected to that.
That's really interesting. Kind of a team thing.
Right.
I hadn't considered that.
Yeah. Like a bit of a creepy vibe, which is like the understatement of the fucking century.
Yeah.
He makes people eat him.
Yeah, on the one hand, reverse cannibal. I love that. So Defiant, they get upstairs. Defiant gives Victoria props for catching case 12 and basically goes out of his way to make her feel better about everyone previously thinking that she was a manipulative monster.
Thanks, buddy.
I like this exchange between them. No need for apologies. Makes sense to do, right? Got to keep an eye on things. There's no PRT keeping tabs on dangerous parahumans. You can be sorry even when wholly justified in your actions, he said. Can you? I think so. And like that they just leave it at that, right? And I think that's great, because it makes sense that Colin would say and think this, and that he spends a lot of time thinking about these things, actually.
Yeah.
And Victoria, if anything, like she's being kind of conciliatory. Like she probably really actually does appreciate the apology, but she's gonna say like, oh, you don't need to apologize. You were only doing the rational thing. But at the same time, we know that she's been completely gutted by everyone thinking this of her the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I think her reaction with Jessica basically proves that, where Jessica's like, "Does that make it better?" And she's like, "No."
Yeah, right.
I mean, I love this idea, this central idea of you can be sorry even when wholly justified in your actions. I think Victoria would have problems with that statement. I mean, she kind of challenges it here. Like, she doesn't really force the issue, but can you is kind of a challenge to that. And I think that's very in line with a Victoria who is kind of going through some shit still. Still leftover shit from the last arc still, right? Like, we got to remember that in the 3 weeks leading up to the events of this day, she was having nightmares, to the point that Ashley was aware of it. She's really terrified of the fact that she might have killed someone in the cradle thing. We thought it was Etna for a while. Turns out, no, you just fixed her with a concussion. Cool. But she's still thinking about the people she may or may not have killed. She's feeling, at the start of this arc, she's feeling terrible about sentencing the people to the prison world. These are things that were justified, and you still kind of feel sorry about them. And I don't think she knows how to feel about that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Like she won't let herself process it the way that Defiant is, and clearly it's a coping mechanism that he's needed to develop.
Yeah.
That's great. I want to think about that now, but unfortunately I don't have time to sit and think about something for 5 minutes quietly.
Which of Defiant's past actions do you think he feels were wholly justified? I mean, that's an interesting hole to go down.
I don't know. Good question. I mean, I don't know. You could say like the way they've dealt with some of their more dangerous enemies, like even ones that we haven't necessarily seen, but also ones that we have seen.
Yeah,
was pretty ruthless, but in a way where there was no other way to deal with it. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I do love this. We've kind of used Colin as not a foil, but like and not exactly a mentor either, but he has been there at certain points in the story to kind of like not explicitly, but kind of help her along through the stuff she's struggling with. Because, like, I mean, the cool thing about sequels is this Colin's a guy who went through an arc. He went through this arc and he came out of it a better person on the other side, and he's learned the things that he's learned all the ways to become this better person, and he has advice for her, and I love his role there.
Yeah, and I love that this interaction kind of is just left there for her to either think about or maybe not.
Yeah.
So we then join a convocation of cool capes who we know and love. Weld is not here. I wonder if he stayed out. Is it like if he stayed away out of consideration for Sveta? I
don't know. I want to say yes, because if yes, that's the smartest goddamn thing he's done all day. But I think anything that whole conversation taught me as well, it's kind of a dum-dum, and I don't know. Maybe he didn't decide it. Maybe it was decided for him by his superiors. Yeah.
Somebody mentioned to him that maybe it would be a good idea.
Yeah, maybe it would be a good idea if you're not here. Well,
or maybe he was just busy. But I definitely kind of had the thought of like, that would be in character.
Yeah. Victoria Mask Tracker. We have to keep an eye on this. She takes it off again.
Okay.
As she approaches to join the meeting, she pulls off her mask, lets down her hood, welcomes the more human side of her again in interacting with these guys.
Yeah, trying to be open.
Yep.
So here the writing takes on this interesting style as Victoria processes and internally summarizes Dragon's reports. So, there's stuff like this where it's like speculation, they'd wanted those minutes, nothing else, referring to the idea that they did this attack that was not actually successful, but it did succeed in stalling them. And I think this is one of those times where, like, on a writing level, yeah, this information could have been conveyed like via dialogue, could have been conveyed via Dragon actually saying these things and people asking questions. Um, but like I feel like maybe there was just no way to make it intrinsically dynamic, and so it works out best if it's just laid out like this. Like this is one of the few cases in my life that I can say like I liked that this information was just like stated in PowerPoint form, you know?
Yeah, I like that take on it. I also think Victoria is like only kind of here. Like she's thinking about other things. She's focusing on other things. She's turning through things. So like she recognizes the importance of what they're discussing, but she's not hanging on every word. So her internal monologue is kind of just summarizing it. And it's also like it's a mix between what Dragon is saying and what she's reading in the report. So she's all just kind of summarizing it. And like it even says like she's flipping through pages, like looking for
Key points.
Yeah.
It's almost like if it had been a long conversation, then Victoria would have actually just spaced out of it and we wouldn't have gotten the information.
Right.
So it kind of has to be this way.
I do think it's a cool way of like showing that like these rules of storytelling aren't hard fast, right?
Yeah.
Like you can break them if you have a reason to do it, I think there's a reason for this, and so I think it did work. It translated to me the mood and the tone of the character right now in how kind of indifferent she was to this until Legend starts speaking, and then she kind of breaks back into it and starts paying attention again, and we switch back to dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, this is about as sharp of a break of the rules as you can get, right? But it's one of those things where like if you understand the purpose of the rules, then you can break the rules because you're not violating the underlying reason why that rule is there.
Yeah, because the reason why I'm trying to think of a way to say this that makes me sound smart, but like if you're using the reason why the rule exists to make a point about something, then breaking it is fine, right?
Yeah,
like because that's the point.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, as dense as this chapter is, I felt like that was definitely something worth pulling out because I was looking at it, I was kind of amazed because I was like, oh, this. I would never write something like this because I would like it would set off my alarm of this is just exposition. I need to embed this in dialogue.
Yeah.
But this is perfect for this scene.
Yeah. Well, so. I think it's a great kind of distillation of what you and I like to do with stories, right? It's like, oh, look, here's a thing. Hey, this worked on me.
Uh-huh.
Hey, that wouldn't work on me normally.
Right.
Why is that? Why did it work on me in a case where it wouldn't have normally? And inspecting that, I think, is important to deciding why stories work the way they do.
I agree. So as we go into the scene, Legend is here being his cool self, but I pretty much forgot that Victoria would actually be heavily biased against Legend. Mm-hmm. It's really easy to slip into seeing him the way he sees himself, the way we were kind of taught to see him by Worm as the guy who, didn't really know what Cauldron was really up to, and he's just kind of a useful idiot. But Victoria doesn't have that context. She kind of holds that all against him.
Yeah, I forgot about that too. Yeah. I just think a Legend is the laser man.
Right. And I'm glad Legend lays out some of this stuff because if he hadn't, then I would have just assumed that the threat was basically like make capes look bad which it is, but he explicitly extends it to say that there's a specific narrative being kind of crafted about Scion, about broken triggers, about the risk of the machine army. Basically, what Teacher has done is kind of amplifying all of these fears, kind of surgically amplifying them.
Yeah.
In order to align against the hero's interests.
Yeah, and we kind of see the full scope of it, right? With how much they've been influencing and just little pushes and pecks here and there, chinks in the armor is a perfect way to explain it. There's like these little bits that he's successfully influenced how people feel just amongst themselves, and all the stuff on the outside that they've been keeping secret. And I forget who it is, but someone mentions revealing more Scion based information to the public than just what Victoria and them did. I mean, like the cool thing about this is we learned that like they 90% stopped the attack from actually happening, right? Like they were able to shut down the systems quickly enough that not all information was disseminated everywhere, but it doesn't matter because now that exists as an excuse for why information is out there, they can just pick and choose what information they want to release when, and nobody will doubt it because like, oh yeah, we had this big leak. So maybe this specific information wasn't actually pulled in the leak, but we can release it now and no one's going to question the source. No one's going to question the validity of it anymore. There's no way of, turning public opinion on any of this stuff anymore. It's brilliant.
It's brilliant. And I don't know how much we've talked about this on the show, but what a 2019 thing this is to have in a story like this
right.
idea that, I mean, fake news, right? It's this idea that once you have created narrative A, you're going and then you introduce the idea that narrative A is a falsehood. You now create two camps, or perhaps it's more accurate to say the two camps that already existed will now just pick whatever evidence they feel like, right?
Yeah.
The side that is already biased against parahumans will say, of course, this is all true, and the parahumans are just saying that it was an elaborate conspiracy of plants because they don't want it to be revealed that they're all horrible people.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the pro-cape people, such as they are, would be like, no, like it really, look, here's the proof that it was a conspiracy. And then you've created the post-truth era, if you will. And it's extremely poisonous and toxic to any kind of, like, it's extremely resistant to any kind of fixing, right? It's not like a trustworthy person can just say, like, no, I'm going to clear it up once and for all. It's just fucked now, It's kind of like modern discourse.
Yeah, and that's the most depressing thing you said all day. But yes, I completely agree. It is very 2019, and yeah, it's almost self-propagating. Like all teacher has to do is maybe release a bit of information, trickle every bit every couple days, just like, oh yeah, here's this little bit more.
Right.
I mean, you almost think like the systems doesn't even need him to do that anymore. It's just going to do it itself at some point.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I think he's done the damage he needs to do. Like his stroke landed. It doesn't matter if they stop 90% of it.
Yep. Fuck. We're fucked.
Yeah. So at this point, Dragon is forced to let everyone know that she's not human. And then some of the other capes from the other independent hero teams admit to having their own, as Victoria puts it, secrets, lies, and dirty laundry.
Yeah, this is so Victoria takes the Dragon news pretty hard.
Yeah.
Even as Dragon's and Dragon and some of the people around him are like, okay, this isn't going to change. Like, this Dragon's been one of the best of our heroes, has been one of the best of our heroes. And meanwhile, in Victoria's head, she's like, fuck.
Right.
We are duplicitous. And it's like,
this is really bad. What does this mean about Defiant? Like her mind starts racing for all the negative implications, which is exactly what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. It's great.
I just love this. Tattletale, can you start by walking us through what you know? I can, Tattletale said, smiling. She's like, this is why she's here, right? So we know this is her favorite thing in the world. This is what she lives for.
Shard Heaven is real. We know this now because Shard Heaven is Tattletale getting to stand in a room of some of the smartest and most powerful people in the world and getting to be the one that gives them the information. Right. That is Tattletale's nirvana.
Does she pinch herself as she walks in?
She might. She might.
Yeah. So at this point, Victoria, so basically Engel arrives to give her deposition, and Victoria basically flees because she can't tolerate any more of these emotional impacts. And in the wake of this, as she's talking to Vista and Sveta outside, she says, kind of out of the blue, she says, we might have to stop playing nice with the civilians.
Yeah, this is the real heel turn of the chapter, right? I mean, we finished 1310 with this ominous note about Victoria kind of diving into her own darkness. We started this chapter with she's in this extremely edgy, dark place, but she hadn't really voiced any change until this moment. And I love that Sveta here serves to really send home how genuinely shocking this is. It's like you want your readers to be shocked by something your character just said, and you want to emphasize and make sure they are shocked by that. So you have Sveta in here come in and say, Victoria, no, Sveta said, sounding genuinely horrified. Like guys, everyone reading at home, this is how you're supposed to feel. Look at how Sveta's reacting right now. That's how you're supposed to feel about what she just said there. It is so specifically against Victoria's brand of heroism, right? Like it's against the things that she's been talking about since the beginning of this book. Like she's the girl that goes to a hospital and like helps sick kids feel better by flying them through the sky. Like she's the one that told Ashley, like, all these interactions matter, like making these people, caring about these people and showing these people that you care and considering them matters. And then suddenly it's like,
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting that we're having this, we just had this discussion about when it's okay to break rules in writing. And here what you have happening is basically what superficially seems like a character breaking character. Victoria's behaving in a way that is uncharacteristic for Victoria. And that is absolutely called for in a situation where what you're wanting to show is, yeah, she's having a real rough time.
Yeah, yeah.
She no, she never would behave like this normally, but she's been pushed to this point where she's blurting out these things that are just like the worst and most fearful and darkest kind of secret thoughts inside her. Like we don't even see her thinking about this before she says it. It's almost like she's just so out of sorts that her id is taking control of her mouth. You know?
Yeah. And I think that's right. And it's fantastic. And it's fantastic specifically because it's like a good way to show shocking without like an unbelievable twist. Twist isn't right. A change. Like while this is against everything that Victoria has talked about in the past, and it's against the Victoria we've seen, we buy it in the moment because we've laid the tracks for it. This is what we have been building up to these past few chapters, the whole arc even. And so, yeah, it's shocking. You're horrified along with Sveta for a little bit, but you're like, in the back of your head, you're like, yeah, I can see why she would say that in this moment. I could see why she would get to this place. And as long as you can say that, then you can do whatever you want with the character, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. So yeah, running away from stressful personal situations and feeling emotionally tumultuous, Victoria, Sveta, and Vista then run right into the last person she wants to see, Jessica. Mm-hmm. And like as they run into her, Vicky touches her mask, which is hanging on her hip, as if she's like wishes she could hide behind it again.
Yeah, I'm glad you pulled that out. I think you're right that part of it is wanting to hide behind it. But I want to go back to that line from the very beginning of the first chapter where Victoria notes that the mask looks accusing at everything that looks at it. So part of me is like, yes, I want to hide behind the mask. But part of me says that she wants to put this thing on so that she can look at Jessica and be like, you.
Yeah.
Judge her as guilty, right? Like I think that's part of it.
Yeah, shame. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so Jessica apologizes. Actually, before Jessica apologizes, she asks if she can be alone with Victoria, and Victoria's friends are like, I don't know, Victoria, what do you think?
Yeah.
which is really nice. Like nice that they have her corner.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, then Jessica apologizes and kind of contextualizes her behavior pretty much as we would have done for her, you know, like she was trapped without resources with, quote, some of her most difficult patients, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
She hasn't been handling her return well. So like it's a genuine apology, right? But Victoria isn't able to sublimate her resentment, and like she feels bad about it. She feels bad that she's not able to like gracefully take the apology, but like that doesn't help. Like it's just that's just where she is.
Yeah, I mean, like I think it's cool because the chapter or the arc kind of comes full circle with this conversation, because part of Jessica's apology is making the points that Victoria made in her own defense back at her. Like it's just like, you kept Rain alive when people wanted to kill him, and they're in custody now. You found out about Kenzie's parents, something she kept secret from me, and you got her to a healthier place. And it's like, yeah, Jessica, this is all the shit she said to you a few chapters ago, and you were like, nah.
Yeah.
And now it's interesting that Victoria is the one kind of like, Like she specifically says, well, no, actually, Kenzie might be different. Like it's not the same kind of problems, but it might be a different and just as bad possibly problem. So
yeah, it's understandable. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I mean, even if somebody just like breaks one of your possessions, there'll be a little bit where you're like, it's fine, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
You know, and eventually you'll get over it. But like in this moment, it's really too much to ask for Victoria to be able to just shrug it off, right?
Yeah, and so I love this entire conversation. I think we should note that just writing wise, this entire conversation, there is none of Victoria's internal monologue. This is all dialogue. It is back and forth dialogue, and until the conversation is over, Victoria doesn't think anything to herself. It's like it's almost as if the book is saying she is focused entirely on this conversation, right?
Yeah.
She can't even think. But yeah, I mean, Jessica says what we've as has been hinted at previously. She's on leave from being a therapist, that she'll help where she can, but she's not seeing patients anymore. She's got to deal with herself. And there is here, I think, a fracturing of the relationship that might be irreparable, right? Like this idea that Jessica has apologized, and we go back to what Defiance said, is you might still feel sorry even if your actions are justified, but that does not mean the person that you hurt has to accept that apology.
Yeah.
The action being justified and you feeling bad about it doesn't mean I have to say, oh, it's fine. And this interaction has reframed Victoria's opinion of Jessica, and I just don't know if she's getting that back.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, I think that she might. Like, I'm not gonna. I wouldn't say from these chapters, it's definitely broken. It's definitely irreparable, because the thing is, it's been one day, and it's been one day of, well, okay. First of all, it's been one day of shit, followed by like, I think it was like 3 weeks of her knowing that Jessica was stonewalling her, and and just like kind of low key freaking out about it, but not being able to do anything, and not understanding why.
Yeah.
And so it's felt like this like slow burn that then culminated in a betrayal, and that's definitely going to take time to recover from.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe I shouldn't be so as final about it as Victoria is. I mean, we talked about at the beginning of this chapter that Victoria is all about permanence and finality right now, right? Like everything in her mind is like, well, there we go.
Yeah.
But I do think, like, I think it's interesting that Victoria has always been of the opinion that non-parahumans just can't understand the things we capes go through. That was one of the first things she said to Darnall. And I think Jessica, in her mind, was the exception to that rule, was a person that had been around parahumans enough that she kind of started to get understanding. And they had disagreements. They had a disagreement on, you know, how much the human side versus the cape side was important to the person. But Victoria kind of got this idea that Jessica, out of all of them, might understand the most. And I feel like this thing has shattered that thought of her, that this idea that, oh, Jessica at least has a base level of understanding of what it's like to be a cape. I don't think she thinks that's true anymore.
I love that. I love that juxtaposition, that the last thing she said before this was this rather stark pronouncement about, you know, the humans kind of maybe being a lost cause. And then she runs into one of the humans immediately. And like you just said, it's the human who she maybe gave the most, she had the most hope invested in. And Jessica has broken with Victoria so easily that maybe she just loses all hope that the rest of humanity will hold faith.
Yep.
I love it.
I don't like it.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it. But
Yeah. Well, it's perfectly done. And I love it. I love that I didn't notice that that's what was happening. Like, I didn't put that together until we had this talk just now. This idea that, like, we juxtapose, oh, it's Jessica, a non-parahuman, after she makes this statement about non-parahumans. It's great.
That's why I love doing the show.
Yep. So as Jessica walks away, Victoria asks her to tell Sveta and Vista to hang back. And then Vicky walks right past Love Lost and Coil, only briefly touching base with Colt. I said Coil.
Yeah.
I mean Colt. And down onto the Orchard Capes.
Fuck.
Yep. And I love how this is written, because we see that Victoria like has a mission in mind, but we aren't privy to what it is for a few paragraphs. We just see her walking past Coil, She says she wants to make a transaction. We don't see who she's talking to. Only after the Orchard Capes are described physically and they respond to her do we finally learn from the narration who they in fact are.
Yeah. And I like this because this doesn't feel like one of those situations where I feel like the point of view character is intentionally masking information from us, the reader, for no reason. I think this is this internally consistent because I think she's working up to the thing that she's about to do mentally. So like, she's not just going to say like, I was going to talk to Orchard about getting Sveta's body back, because I think she's working up to the extreme reality about what she's going to do here. And I think the text kind of shows that. Like here we have, like, as she's walking up, as she's coming to this decision, as she's about to reveal to us what she's doing, we see, I tried that. I was so wary of it. The game, the back and forth, consideration when none was extended back. It was so hard, so difficult. I was so tired of dealing. I wanted to at least consider what we needed to do so that things were dealt with. And like, that's like, all this is going through her mind as she's walking up to Orchard. So like, she's not ready to say, I am going to make a deal with Orchard until she's there actually doing it.
Yeah. I mean, it perfectly reflects her state of mind. I adore it. And this is a sentiment, that quote you just read is very much a sentiment that she's expressed before. This frustration with the fact that, like, you fight the monsters. I don't want to fight the monsters. I want to stop the monsters. Yeah. You know, except it's not talking about the monsters. It's talking about kind of the everything, the fact that everything is just constantly getting worse. Yeah. And all she can really do is kind of just like put a finger in the dike, and it doesn't actually fix anything. And she wants to just fix one thing so she can feel like she did something. Yeah.
I mean, this is the essential heroism of people. I mean, this is also like the essential copness of Victoria, right? Like, cops are never going to solve all the crimes. They're never going to stop crime. That's just not what's ever going to happen. You're going to do the best you can, and sometimes it's going to feel like you never win. I think this is really close to how poor Love Lost felt, right?
Yeah. Interesting that she's standing right by Love Lost in the scene. Right. Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, I think there's something real tragic. Like, this is tragically relatable, right? There's this feeling that, like, it doesn't matter what I do. Like, even when we do win, it's overshadowed by another loss. Like, nothing's getting better. We're not fixing anything. Maybe the thing is, I need to stop being unwilling to do unwilling to go down a path I've never gone down before, because the way I'm doing it is not working.
Yeah. I think unfortunately, you're right about that. So yeah, Victoria looks through their files to confirm that these guys are as bad as we're afraid they are. We've got Mr. Bow and Mr. Drowsing, which are apparently their cape names, not their real names.
Yeah. Yeah, and I appreciate the work here to refresh our memory of just how terrible they are, right? Like, we can't just Wildbow doesn't want to just rely on our previous knowledge of Orchard. We go through it very specifically here. Abducted people that Bonesaw would have called art, what my sister would have called a mistake, a young man to have the heads and legs of a dog, only the trunk of the body normal, 3 women, apparently abductees overseas, made to look identical, the after picture showing them sitting in a row, smiling, the same face. Like, and it goes on from there, and it's just like, it's horrifying. Yeah. Like, I mean, we knew these guys were bad. Like, we knew just, tangentially, and what we've heard about them were bad, but to see it through Victoria's eyes in this moment really cements the extremity with which she's about to negotiate with them.
Yeah, I mean, each of these little snippets, these little vignettes, is like a little piece of microfiction by Wildbow, where you're just like, all right, let me think for a minute about this scenario where they made a body double for Legend. Let me think for a minute about the man who made his wife biologically old. Yeah. Why did he do that? What the fuck? It's so disturbing, right?
It really is. Yeah. I mean, oh my god.
So she goes pretty fucking dark here. She basically tells him that they're going to be sent to a harsh prison planet, trying to terrorize them. and on one level, good, fuck him. But like she's willing to pull in, she says she's willing to pull in favors to make it easier on them if they will help Sveta become human again. So she's like crossing all these lines and being rather like harsh and cruel almost.
Yeah.
That's the point she's at, if it can help her friend.
Yeah, I mean, it's full circle on the one hand, because like we started this arc with her feeling so guilty about throwing these people on this other world, right? Like the disappearing was just something she couldn't feel comfortable about. And now not only is she feeling comfortable about it with these guys, is she's like holding it over their heads and using it to manipulate them. There's that word again. There's manipulation going on here.
Yeah.
But it's that on one level, and then on the other level, she's negotiating with monsters. Like these people represent everything she hates. Everything she hates. Unrepentant monsters. People who mutate bodies. People who fuck with minds. If you had a list of things I fucking hate in Victoria's desk, these guys would check every single one of them. And yet, she's here for her friend.
Yeah, right. I mean, what happens next is Sveta shows up and like verbalizes all of this.
Yes.
Like, what are you? This is not. So I mean, the meeting is interrupted. Sveta and Vista see what she's doing, and they raced forward like there was danger. Which I love that touch, because they're like, oh my god, that can't be right. It looks like Victoria's talking to Orchard.
Yeah, she wouldn't do that.
She wouldn't do that. She would never do that. And then there's this wonderful emotional scene that follows that I think it really works. It really hits home. It really affected me personally. Like just the emotionality of what Victoria's going through, the way Sveta responds to it, and it's a long time in coming. It's been built up gradually, where neither of these friends has said out loud that Sveta's problems could just be fixed if they found the right solution, and that Victoria's been looking for solutions, and here they are finally having this conversation they've kind of been circling around for the whole story.
Yeah. I mean, she basically says that she's been working not just for Sveta. I mean, Sveta's her focus, but she's been working for operants for the Capricorn brothers, asking about power specialists, placing lookouts somewhere, stuff around Rain and Ashley's hands. Like she's been looking for those solutions. And it's really like, I wanted to go through this line by line, and we're not going to do it because we don't have time, but like this conversation, this is the culmination of the arc. This is one of the most powerful emotional conversations in this entire book. It's really wonderful. Like you more than anyone, because you're my best friend. I didn't ask for it. I didn't ask for you to do this for me, but you want it, right? Like I just like, it's so like each and every one of these like these sentences like stab with an emotional, like it pangs your heart. It's true. And like Sveta doesn't want this for Victoria. She doesn't want her to have to like go against everything she believes in to deal with these people, but she can't lie and say, no, this is not what I want. And then like we get in the middle of this conversation, Victoria reveals that she's known about Weld, and she tells that to her. It's like, I've been working on this for weeks for you because I've known this was coming, and I wanted to hopefully have a solution for you before I could get there. And then you have this moment where like Sveta says, what happens if we try and fail? And Victoria's like, I know what happens more than anyone. And Sveta's like, not that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about what Amy did to you. I'm talking about what happens if you get my hopes up and it doesn't work. What happens then? And it's like, God, I don't even have the words to say how powerful and emotional this is. I mean, it's everything. It's this entire book. Like, I think the Sveta interlude's next. I haven't read it. I know it's an interlude chapter. I'm using my my extremely powerful brain to say it's probably going to be Sveta based on how we end this chapter. But why is the Sveta interlude last? Why is this happening now? Because Sveta's well-being is the cornerstone of everything Victoria is and what she's been trying to do this entire book. And I think that's remarkable. And I don't know where this is going to go. Dealing with the devil is is never a good decision. I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if there's going to be consequences if it does work. I suspect we'll find out next week. But it's one of those situations where you're terrified, you're horrified, and you're also like so immensely proud of Victoria for how wonderful of a friend she is to this person. You know, like it's like all those emotions are attacking you from all angles.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fantastic. I mean, I think we remarked before about the fact that Victoria's having a hard enough time, and she did have her body fixed. She is cured, right? But she still had such a rough time in this story. Sveta, to put it metaphorically, is still the wretch. She's still in that place physically. And like I'm forced to call back to the moment when Sveta first sees her in the therapy appointment and is completely overwhelmed seeing her in her body, her original body basically, except now it's made out of dogs and stuff. She doesn't know that though, but like that emotion is one of those things where like if I do a full reread, that's gonna just kill me, right? Because like understanding all the surrounding context is so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, I don't even know what to say. Like, I just like the Victoria's everything comes to a head in this. Like Victoria's love of her friends, Victoria's punishing of herself. Right, like you lost your prosthetic body because I failed you, is what she says here. And it's like, no, you didn't. And it's like, no. And we go back to that one moment where she thought that the idea to split up was a bad one.
Right.
Remember, we talked about how she didn't voice that opinion. She let it go.
Right.
And Victoria, being Victoria, is still dealing with that internally. Like everything that happened after the moment that I said that I didn't push back against a plan I didn't agree with is my fault.
Yeah.
Everything. And it's absurd. But
I think we even talked about that at the time.
Right.
As like, is she going to bite her in the ass that she didn't stick up for her opinion more?
She's certainly going to blame herself. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, like, my feeling reading this last part of this chapter was actually, when I read it the first time, there was part of me that was aware of like, like I can't do this justice in like discussing it beyond just saying, like, it just felt like a perfectly lined up series of gut punches. Like I almost, when I was reading it, I was like, I don't really want to like break this down because it just is wonderful. Like I just want to read it again. And I mean, obviously I enjoy breaking things down, but sometimes something is just so effective. I'm like, it just stands on its own. I love it.
I can't quantify this in any kind of way. But I think this is one of the best parts, writing wise, of this book.
Well, it definitely affected me the most emotionally. This whole bit, this whole ending of Black, I think, and culminating in this scene, I think.
Yeah. We have to mention that Victoria drops the tyrant word here at the end of this chapter, which is a very specific targeted word because we know that that's what the waste is sitting there going, oh yeah. I didn't want to be a tyrant, and is like, yes.
Yeah.
But I think that's great.
Yeah.
This feels like, we're going to talk about it next week. I'm pretty sure it's the Sveta interlude. That means all of our breakthrough interludes are done now. That means structurally it feels like we're then getting into what is going to be the ramp up towards the end of the novel, right? And I just like in this moment that all comes together, right? Like the loose strings, everything we've been talking about just kind of comes together in this distillation of Victoria says, I have to do this because I need to do something. I failed and I'm going to be willing to do this.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's exactly that.
But will Sveta be willing to do it, Matt?
Well, she's nodding, but we'll have to see.
Yeah.
Assuming that's the Sveta interlude. I'm using my giant brain to not let you know that.
You've read the chapter.
I don't know what you're talking about. So that's it for these two chapters. Let's talk a little bit about these names, because I was sure that Mr. Bow and Mr. Drowsing would just easily reveal themselves to me. in terms of the meaning of their names.
Mm-hmm.
They did not really, but you pointed out that bow is a word that is used in Through the Looking Glass.
Yeah, but I don't know how I feel about that. That was me stretching a little bit. But it is. I mean, like the in Alice Through the Looking Glass, Alice comes across flowers, and they teach her why that the bough of a tree is called that.
I mean, I think there's definitely the idea that drowsy is also something that's in Alice. That's she sleeps and dreams some of these things.
Certainly
right?
does. I mean, it would make sense to like all the villains in this story have a very specific Alice related thing. I mean, there's also the bow breaks is the lullaby.
Yeah, right.
And the other guy's name is Drowsy.
And the drowsing guy is basically
Drowsing.
like somebody who affects minds, which you think of that as like minds, sleep. Bow is physical. It's like an arm basically. It's an appendage.
Yeah.
So that's related to his power in a sense. So yeah, there's always more than one thing. But y'all let us know if you think of any other meanings that these could have.
Yep. Every time I'm gonna say I need to go read Alice Through the Looking Glass.
Yeah.
And I'm still not gonna do it.
Yeah. Right. All right. Let's talk about last week's answers to the discussion question. I thought these were really great answers this week. I mean, they're always really good, but I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So the question was, what moral quandary in Parahumans stuck with you the most, and how do you think Wildbow constructs such fiendish situations?
Who was the first answer, Matt?
First answer was from username Wildbow, and they say, I think the quandary that sticks with me the most, speaking as the one person who can observe from the sidelines, is the was Saint right question. After Saint shut down Dragon and took over her responsibilities in the Prelude to Gold Morning, arguments raged for days without ceasing. In the chat, people would pick up where others left off, and there wasn't a 15-minute span where someone wasn't arguing one side or the other. I didn't write it to be a debate, but to give Saint a justified background as the enemy and threat to the most powerful tinker in the setting. From an entirely different perspective, for most of the readers and Doof Media audience, I think the quandaries I enjoy most are the ones where hard moral questions are being made, but it stems not from yin-yang balance, but from questions of morals and character conflicting. If the audience find themselves on either side of the debate regardless, then that's perfect.
I love that.
Yeah.
Like, I want to read everyone else's answers, but I think that's like Wildbow managed to perfectly distill exactly why his situations feel so tough to get a handle on which side you want to support. Like, this idea of morals and character conflicting is perfect. Like, yeah. I think that's perfect.
It reminds me of the distinction between wants and needs, right? Where you have sort of on different layers, the character is pushed in different directions.
Yeah,
I love that. Cool. And there are other people who actually kind of get at similar answers to this. So let's get on to those.
Yeah, sure. Next up, we have Rooster DF, who describes the conflict at the heart of Ward as their favorite moral quandary. Should Victoria forgive Amy? How much of what Amy did is a reasonable mistake for which one can be forgiven? It's a masterful situation because everyone can come to their own judgment, and it's a relatively more relatable quandary than having to shoot a baby. That is true.
Yeah,
that is true. I mean, like the emotional core of the story is, can you forgive someone who did something terrible to you?
Yeah. And I think there's one level where it's like, should you?
Should you?
Because I think can Victoria forgive Amy, and should Victoria forgive Amy are I think actually completely separate questions, like literally completely separate. And you may even come to different answers on them. So, and then in fact, you may come to any combination of different answers on those. I think, with good reasoning. Viridian says everything about Tristan and Byron. Viridian feels like they've been on the opposite side of this issue versus most of the community because they saw Byron's actions as being more terrifying and vicious than others seem to. Experiencing the dissonance of being sympathetic to a character and seeing everybody else say that that character is worse than a murderer was sobering and made them think hard about their morals. As someone who has the position that I have, I can say that I feel ya.
As someone who got dragged after that episode, I'm with you, Viridian. Yeah, I mean, like, I think there's a lot of interesting because a lot of the most exciting of these moral quandaries relate a lot to what people in their own experiences are bringing to them, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people were very, very defensive of Byron because they have been in a situation where their brother was, or sibling or family member, whatever, was being just awful to them. And I really feel terrible for those people. Like, I can't imagine what it's like to go through that. I mean, me and my sister did not get along when I was a kid, but it was never like anything to the level of actual like abuse or mistreatment or anything like that. So I absolutely get that. And I looking back on the episode, I completely am like, oh yeah, this is why people got so angry with me. I totally get that. But yeah. I do think that that's one of these things that those quandaries and even people's reactions to some of the stuff we've said has helped me is, really inspecting the way I feel or the way I framed the conversation and like understanding people a little bit more. Like, I think like we've talked about stories as empathy machines. I think they're empathy machines in that they make you feel things for characters that aren't real. But in discussing the story, you can gain empathy for people just by talking about it. So yeah, that's what it's been for me. And I think Viridian is kind of saying the same thing here.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fascinating aspect of this being like a community. You're not just reading the story, you're interacting and you're almost challenged by the fact that other people disagree with you about the story. And
yeah.
That's a whole extra level on top of it just being a story that's itself challenging.
Yeah.
Cool.
Death of the Artist says the discussion of rain, responsibility, and personality bleed. This poster thought the debate was pretty cut and dried when factoring in Mama Mather's influence, in addition to the whole cult thing. But what elevates this quandary for Death of the Artist was that the possibility of the personality bleed. Is it fair to punish someone when the actions they took were basically taken by a different person? Is it fair to punish someone with amnesia or brain damage? This gets back to what I believe is the core of most good Wildbow morality debates. Where does the buck stop? Is all of Taylor's escalations justified as a response to external pressures, or is she to blame for her own actions? How much can we even assign responsibility to parahumans, given the existence of brain-altering aliens and conflict drives? It's poking at these wishy-washy, non-rigorous colloquial definitions of the self and responsibility that gives the parahuman story such interesting moral dimensions.
That's
well said.
So well said,
yeah.
and concisely said as well. Like,
yeah.
That is so much of what we talk about on the show. Like,
yeah.
Like from 1,000 different angles, just put a bow on it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Chariago says again, rain is their focus. Basically, the story sets him up as a character who had every excuse, every extenuating factor aligned on his side, justifying him. And then we're hit with Love Lost Dream. And even though none of the facts have changed, seeing the damage up close and personal makes things feel completely different. And they say, I think that's Wildbow's superpower, and I think that's what makes the moral quandaries in his stories so effective. He's able to completely sell us on a character's perspective and then turn around and offer an equally convincing opposing viewpoint.
Yeah, I like that. And like what Wildbow said about Saint, it doesn't even have to mean that he's trying to construct a thing where people are torn on which side they should take on this. It's just a matter of, hey, like, I want a convincing character reason for why this character is acting this way.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's the nature of human beings that when you see when you're able to see a person's thought process laid out in front of you, if it makes sense and is understandable from a character perspective,
right,
you're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That does make sense.
Right. I like that he framed, that Wildbow said it's not about like a yin yang balance of viewpoints. It's basically
Right.
about, in this particular case with Love, Lost, and Rain, it's two characters, both of whom are convinced that, both of whom are convinced of opposing viewpoints, basically.
Yeah.
And both of whom have like a very solid, emotionally convincing reason why they're right, even if it might not be quote unquote correct, because what does that really mean in this context?
Right. I like this because one of the things that Aaron Sorkin says in his writing, who's a writer I love also, but he, like especially in The West Wing, would set up specifically to do that very kind of yin yang opposing viewpoints thing, where like he had a position that he believed in, that his characters in his show believed in, but he thought it was important to bring opposing characters in who held the opposite position and actually take the time to develop the reasoning and logic behind that position. But that's like why shows like The West Wing, as much as I love them, can feel preachy at times, because you're specifically setting up that yin yang, but then also saying,
it's totally yin.
But it's yang.
Yeah.
Right? Like whereas here, it's not motivated. Like Wildbow said, it's not motivated by which of these is right. It all comes down to character.
Yeah.
It's like we're not talking about is A right or is B right. It's no, A is Taylor, B is I don't know,
Triumph.
There you go, Triumph. Like it's all motivated by who they are as people, not what we're specifically trying to say about the morality. And then that conversation about the morality comes from the character. Like you start with character. That's what this has taught me, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Fantastic. I love it.
Yeah. All right. Sarah Penguin says, in general, Wildbow makes sure that the character choices all come from their own unique worldviews, so that moral quandaries are always situated within the framing of certain character or characters. Hey, we just said that. Yeah. Sarah then talks about how dangerous capes are treated. First, she discusses the birdcage as a massive human rights violation, which is strategically first shown to us via the basically innocent canary. Now we have an element of the prison planet. There was, in the past, the cauldron policy of nipping S-class threads in the bud, basically killing people for crimes they hadn't yet committed. There is no right answer, just which is least bad, and an abusive police state where innocents can get removed either with a fake trial or no trial, or one where dangerous killers get free reign by never being properly removed from society.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that first bit. That's another good summary of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And then the kind of the impossibility of a happy answer to this issue of how do we deal with these super dangerous, superpowered people. There's literally no like Jean-Luc Picard answer here.
Yeah, and it's so funny because like that's just reality, right?
Yeah.
Like our geopolitical issues in this world aren't easy. There's never, like, we like to think that there's one clear right answer and there's one clear wrong answer, but it's so rarely the case. It's picking and choosing sometimes. And like we don't like that as much in our fiction because it makes it more difficult. Like it's like we want to live in a world where the right answer is the obvious one. But I mean that's why like I think some of the best like popcorn stories are fun. But I think some of the best storytelling challenges you a little bit, pushes against your assumptions. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what these stories do.
Yeah, I agree. Next answer, Rid Tom mentions the Triumph incident. And they say Taylor inflicted horrible mental and physical torture on Triumph and his father for basically no reason, since we understand that Coyle never would have given up Dinah. And not only that, but maybe it was also wrong in the macro in the sense that what Taylor accomplished by that was to get the mayor to argue against condemning Brockton Bay, and maybe all kinds of bad shit could have been averted if Brockton Bay had just been condemned. So it's interesting because this is more just pointing out what a bad idea her torture of Triumph was.
Yeah, but sold.
But
bad Taylor.
Right, but I mean I think it was a quandary in the sense that Taylor did it anyway because she was convinced that it was worth it. Yeah. And it kind of totally wasn't. Like this is one of the I usually just appreciate the ambiguity of situations. This is one where I was just like, nah, this is just an example of Taylor being able to convince herself to do terrible things. But Triumph Love it.
Yeah. Next up, we have Me for Mars, who says the necessity of making Case 53s. Ooh, topical.
Yeah.
Wildbow created the setting such that creating Case 53s was the most efficient way to test the power vials, and thusly the most efficient way to build all the army they thought they needed. I can't help but marvel at the depraved genius of it all, and I had no idea if Cauldron would be able to help stop Scion in the way they did without taking this monstrous action. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think this is one where I think maybe even on this show we've been kind of like unforgiving of Cauldron for doing this, but it's like from their point of view, they didn't have any other way of kind of unraveling the secret of how the powers worked, and without doing that, they really would have been kind of helpless in the face of Scion. Or at least that was their belief, and I don't think they had any real reason to believe like, oh, the secret is to trick him with pictures of his dead wife.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, like I still think Cauldron was terrible in what they did, and but I'd be lying if I said that that's a conclusion I'm 100% comfortable with, right? Like, I mean, like this, I think this gets to Cauldron in general, because it's like, I think it's how can you be 100% comfortable in that when, like, you understand why they felt the need to do that? I think they lost a bit of their, if you want to call it soul, I don't know, whatever, but you get it.
Yeah.
You get it. I get it.
Yeah. I mean, it seemed like Dr. Mother had basically more or less gradually eroded away her humanity, and we saw this happen with many of the Cauldron people, where they basically admit at some point like they're no longer the person who they were at the start of this.
Yeah,
like Alexandria. I
mean that's one thing that I think unquestionably Worm does, is show that even if these choices seem like the fair ones or the right ones, they will destroy you.
Yeah.
Like that's just that's what will happen.
Yeah. It doesn't matter how good of a story you can tell yourself about how it's justified, really.
Yeah.
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 Madness Factory says, I get the impression that pretty much all major morally questionable stuff in Ward is set up to contrast with the dilemmas in Worm in a very specific way. In Worm, all tough decisions are motivated by rationality and personal values, while in Ward, they are motivated by irrationality and circumstance. They elaborate, they basically say, take any Worm character who commits a monstrous act and they'll be able to justify it. That character will be able to justify it in logical, perhaps even explicitly utilitarian terms, whereas Ward's villains, on the other hand, are motivated by desperation, circumstances beyond their control, and fear. The people doing the really bad stuff in Ward can often be viewed as victims in their own right. It makes sense that the apocalypse would make people desperate. And then they go on to say, I feel that this is also the reason why there haven't been any big debates about morality in Ward. I don't know if that's true, but there's probably been less. It's harder to judge what is right or figure out what you do in a character's place. Would you kill someone for water if you were literally dying of thirst in a desert? If yes, how many people would you kill? The morality is muddled because the desperate situation demands that you do what you need to do in order to do rather than what you believe is right to do. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of comparing the quandaries of those two books against each other like that.
Yeah, definitely a thought-provoking way of looking at it. I mean, I don't know if there's like a clear cut demarcation between Worm and Ward, but I do like this idea that the post-apocalypse has made people desperate in this way and pushed them basically into a different kind of domain of having to make these decisions. And I think that is true, that we don't actually see as many of these characters kind of making these cold, calculating decisions where they're like making some kind of power grab or trying to optimize. They're more just trying to survive, and I think that is true.
Yeah, that is very true. Yeah. So next up we have Tsarwat, who says, in Snare, Taylor decides not to mercy heal Brian. Everyone else thinks they should do so. After his catastrophic physical recovery, even Brian says that Taylor should have killed him, but she refused out of love, stubbornness, or the patented "my way is the only way" Taylor approach. What makes it difficult is that, as Taylor points out, her decision worked out. Years later, Taylor makes the opposite choice, euthanizing a baby who is in the clutches of the Slaughterhouse 9000. So how do you think Wildbow constructs such fiendish situations? by making both sides plausible and not explicitly giving away his own views. I'm sure he has opinions on which is right, at least sometimes, but he never really writes moralistic tracks.
Yep, agree.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, and I like that they point out that here we have a character who is absolutely steadfast in making one choice and then later makes the opposite choice when she's older and more cynical and so forth. And it feels authentic to the character in both situations, actually.
That happens in Buffy. Watch Buffy. It's really good. It's really good.
Buffy shoots a baby?
Well, no, it's not. It's actually, I can't say too much. Spoilers.
Okay, all right.
It's kind of the opposite. Don't worry about it.
Okay, all right. Moving on. Scanderson says, asked her again, specifically the fact that it didn't feel like a quandary at the time. They say, to reiterate, Wildbow had his main character shoot an infant in the head, and my reaction when I read it was, yeah, fair enough. To me, that sums up Worm. Horrific actions, but the situations around it was so bad that an argument can be made it was the right thing to do at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, especially the binge experience of reading Worm is like, yeah, I mean, awesome. It's awesome that she did that. And then later you're like, oh my God, am I a monster? Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. Cool. And that was something that I had a lot of trouble with through that book, as everyone will remember. Up next, Captain Rhino also mentions Saint versus Dragon. They mention being personally concerned, hitting my microphone, about the threat of powerful superhuman AI, and Saint is a character who embodies this fear and rationally acts upon it. Except we spent the whole story getting to know Dragon personally. I leave the interlude firmly in Dragon's camp and enjoy the verbal beatdown Saint gets from Tattletale during Gold Morning. But is it that because Saint was objectively wrong? Or is it a triumph of emotionally manipulative storytelling, in a good way, over consistent moral principles?
Yeah, I like this answer because I agree. Like, I came into the story very skeptical of AI, and you could have easily convinced me that the AI was going to be the danger, because that's just my personal beliefs about the real world. But
yeah,
the story tricked me into. I mean, not tricked me. Like, it showed me that Dragon is actually like genuinely a good person. And so you're in the situation where you're like actually sort of arguing against your own literal personal beliefs because the story has framed it correctly.
We'll see about that. I still think we're playing the Saint was right long game.
Oh, that's a super long game.
I don't even really think that.
I know you don't, but it would be funny, wouldn't it?
It sure would be funny.
Next up, Tinky Forecast makes an interesting parallel to the fact that the scientists working on the Manhattan Project were motivated by personal fears and concerns, and then many of them later came to regret their participation. Taylor, much like these scientists, ended the quote-unquote war in a unilateral, atrocious action, but quickly regrets the action. They say the result is that in universe, as stated by Victoria, emotions are extremely charged and confused in regards to Taylor. Her actions were ultimately necessary, but were they right? Do the ends as brought into the fore by Taylor's actions justify what she did? I still don't really know, but what's important is to understand why Taylor acted the way she did.
Yeah, I like that. And I mean, this gets back to the whole thing that, like, I don't think Worm is a story that's about whether or not the actions were right or wrong. I think Worm is a story about what happens to you when you make those actions.
Yeah.
Like,
I agree. I think that's always been our take, which is hard to
articulate sometimes.
Yeah.
Especially when you get into the moral weeds, because sometimes they're fun to go into.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's seductive. That's why it tends to happen.
Yeah. Up next, we have March Was May, who says, similar to Tenki's point, should Kepri have made her person swarm? Would they still even have won if she hadn't forced the Tinkers to make their gun? Did Taylor even realize she was Regent 9000? Wildbow leaves it ambiguous not only whether Taylor was justified, but even whether her crowning achievement was necessary. Ooh, Taylor burn.
Yeah.
You didn't do shit, Taylor.
I know.
Go hang out in the mall. Got her.
Good one. X Das Niveau points out the Capricorn dilemma and asks, how can they live without being assholes to each other? I guess that's the quandary that they're pointing out. And yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
I mean, and that's a fun one to think about, right? Like, just I've actually, I think the Capricorn situation has taken up a disproportionate amount of my thoughts, regarding the story, just because it's such a fascinating crux of some people really wronging each other, and then you ask, okay, well, who wronged the other more? And then you add the wrinkle. Now you basically can never get away from that person. And so you're going to have to figure out some kind of solution.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that they're relatively okay right now is it's a damn miracle.
Yeah. Right.
All right. And finally, we have Placid Platypus, who says the scene where they murdered the Nyx clone in cold blood after the clone agrees to give them information. Maybe I'm just too hung up on honesty and game theory, but this bothers me a lot more than shooting Aster, and all the more so with all the characterizations of the clone we see with Ashley. Yeah, I mean, I like that. I mean, the book kind of takes or the characters in the book at least kind of take a stance that clones,
not people. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that is troubling, and
I mean, it's very troubling in retrospect because they're in this like battle mode of like they're basically in a horror movie at the time, right? I mean, it's kind of funny because like if you have Jason Voorhees like in a bear trap, and
are you gonna say not kill Jason Voorhees?
Yeah, right. If Jason's like, I'll tell you where the bodies are if you let me go. Like, you're in a horror movie. The correct move is to kill Jason Voorhees. if they're in this horror dungeon, the correct move is to kill the Nyx clone. But in context of everything we understand now, it's super upsetting that the heroes basically they just murdered somebody that they didn't even really have to.
I mean, Ashley is like a real person.
Yeah.
And she's changed and she's awesome. And it's like, imagine what Nyx could have become.
I know. Exactly. It's upsetting.
Yeah.
All right, Scott.
That was fun. Let's never do that again.
Yeah. Good answers, everyone. New discussion question for this week. So in light of the fact that we just asked the question, what was your favorite moral quandary? I'm just gonna be very like object level and say, here's the question: should Sveta go through with this? Why or why not? And base your answer on what we know at this point in the story, regardless of what happens in the next chapter, because the question is, should she go through with it, right? Like,
not will she, not what do you think is going to happen if she does or doesn't.
Yeah.
Should she?
And I think I personally think this is a good question because I think there's great arguments on either side, and I love to hear people's analysis. Like I feel like this is a weirdly a relatable question. Like, we're not all tentacle creatures, but we all do have things where it's like some major change that we have to go through, and there are reasons to do it, and there are reasons why if we do it, it might blow up in our faces terribly.
Yeah.
So please let us know what you think about this.
Yeah, I like it. Good question, Matt.
Thank you. And that's all we got for you this week on We've Got Ward. You guys are all part of this show, so feel free to provide us with advice, questions, or thoughts on this week's reading.
You can reach out to us via email at gotwormpod@gmail.com or over on our Twitter account at gotwormpod. Oh my God, if I haven't responded to you on email, I'm so sorry. I know I said this like 2 weeks ago, and I said I was going to catch up, and then I didn't catch up, and it's only gotten worse, and I'm sorry. I love you all. I'll get better at it.
He will.
Please keep emailing us. Don't get discouraged just because I'm bad at them.
Yeah.
We love getting your emails. We truly do. My personal Twitter is at ScottDaily85 and Matt's is at MoreDinamail. If you just want to follow us and Matt has like clever dry humor tweets and I mostly just whine about movies. So that's what you got there.
Yeah. The real value of my Twitter feed is that I retweet funny things and I don't really talk about serious things. So it's just fun.
It's basically the only way social media can be good.
You've
cracked it.
I mean, that's my philosophy. And did everyone like how I made it seem like it was Scott's responsibility to respond to emails, even though we both have full capability of doing that? I thought that was pretty deft.
Hey, wait a minute.
Anyway, if you're not already subscribed to We've Got Ward, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can listen to podcasts.
And as always, you can find all the shows we do over at our website, doofmedia.com. That's where you can find this show, Vow to View, Deep Impact, and our variety show, The Doofcast, which covered Avatar, The Last Airbender, last week.
Yeah.
We watched the first season.
We did, and we're going to watch the second season at some point.
Yeah, I made some progress in that. I got to make more.
Yeah, me too. And Deep Impact, they're getting into one of my favorite parts of the story. So now's the time to catch up with Pact.
I'm trying. Stop judging me.
And if you like any of our shows and you want to support them, consider donating to our Patreon account, patreon.com/doofmedia. You can donate $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. Supporting us on Patreon gives you tons of great bonuses like voting in our quarterly, fan art and costume contest, Q&A sessions, access to live streams of our recording sessions, and our excellent Discord chat. Special thanks this week to new Bidoofs, Benzimo and Kuiper at the $1 level, Sean at the $5 level, and new Doof Troop member Ted V at the $10 level. Welcome, all of you, and thank you so much. That really means a lot to us.
Yeah, I was up really late last night working on the script, and I don't know why. Like when I went to pull these down, like you know how you have that moment when you're like, wow. It's like I went to pull all the new patrons down, and then I looked at the number of our patrons, and we've got, I think, 245 people that are supporting us to do this thing. And you know how like the weird way your brain works is like there's normalization that happens, right? You just get used to a certain way of doing things or a certain level of existence, and then randomly your brain just goes like, wait a minute, that's insane.
Right.
And that's kind of what happened to me last night, where I was like, yeah, we've been running this website for a while and been doing this Patreon for a while, and it's been successful and it's growing and it's awesome. And you just kind of get used to that fact. And then last night my brain just went like, holy shit. And I think I messaged Matt, like he was asleep. It was like 1 a.m. or something ridiculous. I messaged Matt and I was just like, friendly reminder that this is incredible and insane. So like we can't even explain how amazing you guys have been and how much this means to us that we get to talk about the things we love on the internet, and you guys help support and make that happen. It's so awesome.
And you really have, helped improve the quality of this thing. All those of you who donate, I mean, it has materially made this show better, and I hope that, that comes through, because for us it certainly does. Certainly makes it makes us better able to do it, and makes us better able to make a good product here, and just in general makes things better for us.
Yeah.
Cool. And as always, while you are thinking about donating to people and making their lives better, head over to Wildbow's Patreon, patreon.com/wildbow, and donate to him as well, because this is his world and we're just playing in it.
Yeah. And if you cannot afford to donate, that's okay. After saying all that, we understand that not everyone is able to do that, and that's fine. But there's tons of ways to help us out. You can share our podcast with friends, family. You can retweet our stuff on Twitter. I don't know if that actually works, but it feels like it should. So do that. And you can leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. We don't have any new reviews to read this week, unfortunately, so send them in. We have been getting new ratings. I see that number go up almost every day, but not everyone leaves reviews, and that's fine. I'm not really good at leaving reviews either, but we really do appreciate those of you that take the time to do that, because it helps people give us a shot when they see our podcast.
Yeah. Well, that's it for this week's show. Next week, we're going to have an interlude, and then maybe another black chapter,
or maybe a new arc.
Maybe arc 14. We'll have to see. But in any case, it's going to be awesome.
It's going to be one of those ones that I label as final. That it's just going to be just a fucking lie. I'm just going to be lying to all of you.
It's just going to be. You're right. It's going to be a lie.
So we'll see you then.